They say some marriages begin with love, others with ambition. Mine? It started with betrayal, and I walked in on it with my wedding dress still warm. I was supposed to be the obedient bride, the strategic piece moved across the board to save my family's name. Instead, I became the woman who refused to break. If you want to know how a duchess is really made, not through bloodlines or blessings, but through sheer force of will in a world designed to crush her, then stay with me until the end. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Not him, not her, and definitely not me. The chapel smelled like old money and older lies. Alara Whitlock, no, Alara Ashford now, she had to remind herself, stood perfectly still as the final notes of the processional faded into the vaulted ceiling. The guests had already begun their polite exodus toward the reception hall, their whispers echoing off stone walls that had witnessed 3 centuries of Ashford vows. Most of those marriages had been strategic too. At least she wasn't unique in her misery. "You look pale," her new husband observed. Not with concern, just stating a fact, the way someone might comment on the weather. Rowan Ashford, Duke of Greymont, was objectively handsome in the way that old portraits were handsome, all sharp lines and aristocratic distance. Dark hair, gray eyes that revealed nothing, a jaw that could have been carved from the same marble as his family's monuments. He wore his title like armor, and he'd barely looked at her during the entire ceremony. When the priest had prompted him to kiss his bride, he delivered a perfunctory press of lips that lasted maybe 2 seconds. She'd tasted champagne on his breath and wondered whose glass he'd been sharing before the ceremony. "I'm fine," Alara replied, smoothing down the front of her gown. The dress had cost more than some people earned in a year. Layers of ivory silk and imported lace, all of it chosen by her mother with the kind of desperate precision that comes from knowing your family's fortune hangs by a thread. "Just eager to greet our guests." "Our guests," Rowan repeated, and something flickered across his face. Amusement? Contempt? It was gone before she could name it. "Right, let's get this over with." He offered his arm. She took it. They walked together down the aisle, every step choreographed, every smile practiced. The perfect couple, the ideal match. Her family's industrial wealth married to his ancient name, saving both houses from different kinds of ruin. It was the social event of the season, according to the papers. A fairy tale, one columnist had gushed. Alara had stopped believing in fairy tales when she was 12, and overheard her father explaining to her mother that daughters were investments that matured at 18. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, a cavernous space with crystal chandeliers and windows that overlooked ground so vast you couldn't see the edges. Alara had visited Ashford Manor exactly 3 times before today, once for the initial introduction, once to discuss wedding arrangements, and once for a stilted dinner where Rowan had spent most of the meal responding to her attempts at conversation with monosyllables while checking his pocket watch. She'd asked him then what he was late for. "Nothing that concerns you," he'd said. Now, standing in the receiving line as an endless parade of aristocrats and social climbers offered their congratulations, Alara felt the weight of her new reality settling over her shoulders like a coat that didn't quite fit. She smiled until her face hurt. She thanked people whose names she'd forget within the hour. She pretended not to notice the way certain guests looked at her, some with pity, others with calculation, a few with barely concealed satisfaction. They all knew. Of course they knew. High society didn't keep secrets. It weaponized them. "Darling, you look radiant," gushed Lady Pemberton, a woman whose main occupation seemed to be knowing everyone's business before they did. "And Rowan, so handsome. You must be thrilled to finally settle down." "Thrilled," Rowan echoed flatly. Lady Pemberton's smile tightened. "Well, marriage is quite the adjustment, isn't it? But I'm sure you two will manage beautifully, especially with all that lovely Whitlock money to renovate the East Wing. It's been looking rather shabby, hasn't it?" Alara felt Rowan's arm tense beneath her hand. "The estate has never looked shabby," he said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze wine. "Perhaps you're thinking of your own property, Lady Pemberton. I've heard the roof is giving you trouble." Lady Pemberton's face flushed. She mumbled something about checking on the hors d'oeuvres and scurried away. "That was unnecessary," Alara murmured. "She insulted my home. She insulted both of us. You just chose the less important target." Rowan looked at her then, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time all day. "And what would you have preferred? Should I have defended your family's honor? The honor that comes from manufacturing textiles and selling them to people who actually work for a living? There it was. The real divide between them, laid bare with surgical precision. My father built his company from nothing, Alara said quietly, keeping her smile fixed for the benefit of anyone watching. Your father inherited everything and lost most of it gambling on bad investments. At least we're honest about where our money comes from. Rowan's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might actually respond with something real. Instead, he turned to greet the next guest, dismissing her as thoroughly as if she'd never spoken. The reception dragged on. Dinner was served, 7 courses, each more elaborate than the last, all of it tasting like sawdust in Alara's mouth. Speeches were made. Her father, already showing signs of the illness that would eventually consume him, stood with visible effort to toast the happy couple. He spoke about legacy, about the joining of 2 great houses, about the bright future ahead. His hands trembled as he raised his glass. Rowan's speech was shorter. He thanked the guests for coming, mentioned something vague about partnership and tradition, and sat down. No mention of Alara specifically. No personal touch whatsoever, just obligation, neatly wrapped in proper grammar and delivered with the emotional range of a tax document. The dancing began near midnight. Protocol demanded the first dance go to the bride and groom. Rowan led her to the floor with all the enthusiasm of a man headed for dental surgery. Just follow my lead, he muttered. I know how to waltz. Could have fooled me. Alara stepped on his foot, hard. Oops. His eyes widened slightly, surprise, maybe even a flash of respect, but he said nothing. They moved through the rest of the dance in silence, his hand at her waist feeling more like a restraint than an embrace. When the music finally ended, he stepped back immediately, putting space between them before anyone else could notice how little contact they'd actually maintained. I need some air, he said, and walked away before she could respond. Alara stood in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of people, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. Her mother appeared at her elbow. You're doing wonderfully, dear. Am I? These things take time. He'll warm up to you. Mother, he looks at me like I'm a piece of furniture that came with the house. Her mother's expression hardened. Then be better furniture. Be the kind he can't ignore. You're a duchess now, Alara. That title carries weight. Use it. Before Alara could point out that a title without respect was just an empty word, her mother had already glided away to charm some earl or another. Always networking, always positioning. It's how they'd survived when her father's business hit rough patches. Her mother had taught her that charm was currency and appearances were armor, but nobody had taught her what to do when both failed. The rest of the evening blurred together. More dancing with other partners. Business associates of her father's, minor nobles looking to curry favor. One particularly bold younger son who held her too close and whispered that Ashford was a fool not to appreciate her. She smiled through all of it, played her role perfectly, and counted down the minutes until this performance could finally end. Around 2 a.m, the last guest departed. The staff began the massive undertaking of cleaning up. Alara stood in the foyer, still in her wedding dress, watching servants carry away towers of dishes and half-empty champagne bottles. Mrs. Fairweather, the head housekeeper, approached with a motherly expression. She was a stout woman in her 60s, with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. Your Grace, shall I show you to your chambers? Your Grace. The title still felt foreign, like a costume she hadn't quite grown into yet. Yes, please. They climbed the grand staircase, Mrs. Fairweather maintaining a respectful half-step behind. The manor was quiet now, vast and echoing. Portraits of previous Ashfords lined the walls, generations of stern faces staring down at her, judging this newcomer who'd bought her way into their bloodline. The Duke's chambers are in the east wing, Mrs. Fairweather explained. Your rooms are adjacent, connected by a sitting room. The arrangement is quite traditional. Traditional, that word again. Code for, you'll have separate bedrooms because that's how proper aristocrats pretend they don't have bodies. Mrs. Fairweather opened a heavy oak door. Your personal belongings have already been unpacked. If you need anything, there's a bell pull by the bed. Someone will attend you immediately. Thank you. The housekeeper hesitated. Your Grace, if I may, the Duke can be difficult. He's carried certain burdens for a long time. But he's not cruel. Just closed off. It was more honesty than anyone else had offered all day. I appreciate the warning, Ilara said softly. It's not a warning, ma'am. Just an observation. From someone who's watched this family longer than most. Mrs. Fairweather withdrew, closing the door with a soft click. Ilara surveyed her new bedroom. It was beautiful, she supposed. All rich fabrics and antique furniture, a 4-poster bed that could sleep 6 people comfortably, windows that overlooked the garden. Everything a duchess could want. Everything except a husband who gave a damn. She sat down at the vanity and began removing the hundreds of pins from her hair. Her reflection stared back at her. 22 years old, dark eyes ringed with exhaustion, the beginnings of what would either be strength or bitterness forming around her mouth. She barely recognized herself. A sound from the adjacent sitting room made her pause. Voices, low but audible, through the door. Rowan's voice, tight with irritation. You shouldn't be here tonight. A woman's voice, sultry and confident. Where else would I be? Did you really think some ceremony would change anything? Keep your voice down. Why? Afraid your little bride will hear? She's probably crying into her pillow, poor thing. You were absolutely brutal today. I was appropriate. You were cruel, even for you. A pause. Come here. We can't. Not tonight. Why not? It's not like she'll expect you in her bed. Everyone knows this marriage is for show. Ilara's hands had frozen in her hair. She knew she should move, should make noise, should do something to announce her presence. Instead, she sat completely still, listening to her world collapse with eavesdropper's precision. It's complicated, Rowan said, but his voice had softened. It's not complicated. You love me. You've always loved me. She's just the bank account you had to marry to keep this pile of stones from crumbling. That doesn't change us. Victoria, don't you dare feel guilty. We've been together for 5 years. 5 years, Rowan. She's been in your life for 3 months, and only because your accountant forced your hand. The sound of movement, fabric rustling, then silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than words. Ilara stood up very carefully, very quietly. She walked to the connecting door. Her hand hovered over the handle. She could walk away, pretend she'd heard nothing. Go to bed in her separate room and wake up tomorrow to begin building whatever cold, distant arrangement passed for marriage in this world. That's what a proper duchess would do. That's what her mother would advise. Preserve appearances, protect the alliance. Ilara opened the door. The sitting room was dimly lit, just a few lamps casting amber shadows across furniture that probably cost more than her childhood home. And there, on the settee, was her husband of exactly 8 hours, locked in an embrace with a woman who was objectively stunning, blonde, elegant, wearing a dress that suggested she'd been at the reception and simply never left. They broke apart. Rowan's face went white. Ilara, your grace, Ilara corrected, her voice eerily calm. If we're going to maintain the fiction of respect, let's at least use proper titles. Victoria, because of course that was her name. Beautiful women were always named Victoria or Isabella or something equally melodious. Stood up with zero embarrassment. If anything, she looked pleased. So you're the merchant's daughter, Victoria said, looking Ilara up and down like she was evaluating livestock. You're prettier than I expected. That must make this even harder for you. Victoria, leave, Rowan said, finally finding his spine. Why? Let her see what she's really competing with. Let her understand exactly where she stands in this arrangement. I said leave. Victoria smiled, not warmly, but with the confidence of someone who knew she'd already won. She collected her wrap from the chair, took her time adjusting it, then crossed to Rowan and kissed him on the mouth. Not a peck. A full, possessive kiss that went on long enough to make her point. I'll see you Tuesday, she said. Then, to Ilara. He's not yours, sweetheart. He never will be. But congratulations on the title. I'm sure it'll keep you warm at night. She swept out, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and deliberate cruelty. The silence that followed was suffocating. Rowan stood there, still as a statue, not meeting Ilara's eyes. It's not... Don't, Ilara cut him off. Don't you dare insult me by pretending this is anything other than what it is. It's complicated. That's the second time you've said that tonight. Here's what's not complicated. You married me this morning. You made vows. In front of hundreds of people, you promised. Those vows were for show, Rowan exploded, and there was real emotion in his voice now. Anger, yes, but underneath it something that looked almost like desperation. You know that. Your family knows that. This entire arrangement is a transaction. Your father gets the social legitimacy he's been chasing his whole life, and I get enough capital to keep the estate from being seized for debt. That's it. That's the deal. And her? Victoria has nothing to do with the deal. Victoria has everything to do with the deal. Alara's voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. Because I could have accepted a business arrangement. I could have lived with a marriage that was all contract and no heart. But you didn't even have the decency to let the ink dry before flaunting your mistress in the room next to mine. I didn't plan this. You didn't plan to get caught. There's a difference. Rowan finally looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than indifference in his face. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at being confronted. Hard to tell. What did you expect? He asked, quieter now. That I'd fall madly in love with you between the engagement announcement and the wedding? That's not how this works. People like us, we don't marry for love. We marry for advantage. And people like Victoria, what do you call that? A mistake I made years ago that I can't seem to fix. The honesty of it landed like a slap. Not because it was cruel, though it was, but because it confirmed what she'd already feared. She wasn't just unwanted, she was an obligation, a problem to be managed. Alara drew herself up to her full height. She was tall for a woman, nearly 5'9", and right now she needed every inch. You're right, she said coldly. This is a business arrangement, so let me be clear about the terms. You can keep your mistress. I don't care. But you will be discreet. You will not humiliate me publicly. You will not flaunt her at social events or bring her into my home. And yes, Rowan, this is my home now too, whether you like it or not. You wanted my family's money? You got it, but that came with me attached, and I will not be treated like furniture. Alara, I'm not finished. Her hands were shaking, but her voice stayed steady. I will be a perfect duchess. I will run this estate, manage the staff, attend every social function, and play my role flawlessly. I will be everything a Duke of Greymont could possibly need in a wife, except in your bed, which you've made clear you don't want me in anyway. But in exchange, you will show me respect. Public respect. The kind that comes with the title I just bought into. Do we understand each other? Rowan stared at her like he'd never actually seen her before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe all he'd seen was the transaction. Yes, he said finally. We understand each other. Good. Alara turned toward her bedroom door, then paused. And Rowan? If you ever bring her into this suite again, I will burn this entire manor to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. That's not a threat. It's a promise. She walked into her bedroom and closed the door. Then she locked it. Then she slid down to the floor, still in her wedding dress, and let herself shake apart where nobody could see. But she didn't cry. She refused to give them that. Morning came too early and too bright. Alara woke up in the four-poster bed, still wearing her wedding dress because she'd been too exhausted to change out of it. The corset had left angry red marks across her ribs, her head pounded from champagne and emotional whiplash. Everything hurt. She rang for a maid. A young girl appeared, 18, maybe 19, with nervous eyes and a curtsy so deep it looked painful. Your Grace, I'm Annie. Mrs. Fairweather assigned me to be your lady's maid. I'll be attending to your needs from now on. Annie, Alara repeated, forcing herself to sit up. Thank you. Could you help me out of this dress? And then run a bath? Of course, Your Grace, right away. The girl worked efficiently, unlacing the complicated gown with practiced fingers. If she noticed the tension in Alara's shoulders or the exhaustion in her eyes, she was too well trained to comment. The household staff are eager to meet you properly, Annie ventured as she hung the dress in the massive wardrobe. Mrs. Fairweather says you're to tour the manor today and be introduced to everyone. Is that what the Duke wants? Annie hesitated. The Duke left early this morning, Your Grace. He said he had business in town. Of course he did. The bath helped. Hot water, lavender soap, 20 minutes of blessed silence. Alara let herself sink beneath the surface and imagined a different life. One where she'd refused the match, where she'd told her father that no amount of social advancement was worth this particular cage. But that had never been a real option. Her father's business had been failing. They'd needed the Ashford connection, and she'd been raised to do her duty. She'd just never imagined duty would taste like this much ash. Annie helped her dress in a more practical gown, deep green wool, fitted but not constraining, appropriate for meeting staff and touring an estate. Her hair was arranged in a simple braided crown, no jewelry except her wedding ring, which felt heavy as an anchor. Mrs. Fairweather was waiting in the corridor outside. "Good morning, Your Grace. I trust you slept well?" It was a polite lie, smoothly delivered. Alara appreciated the professionalism. "Well enough, thank you. I understand we're touring the house today?" "Yes, ma'am. There's quite a lot to see. Ashford Manor has 63 rooms, not counting the servant quarters. The grounds span 200 acres. It can be overwhelming at first." "I'm sure I'll manage." They started with the public rooms, the ballroom from last night, now restored to pristine order, the formal dining room with its table that could seat 40, the library, which was actually magnificent, 3 stories of books stretching up to a glass-domed ceiling. Alara paused there, trailing her fingers along leather spines. "The Duke spends quite a bit of time here," Mrs. Fairweather offered. "Reading?" "Brooding, mostly." The housekeeper's mouth twitched. "But also reading, yes." They moved through drawing rooms and sitting rooms, a music room with a harp that looked like it hadn't been played in years, a conservatory full of plants that someone clearly tended with obsessive care. Every space was beautiful. Every space felt empty. "And the East Wing?" Alara asked. Mrs. Fairweather's expression became carefully neutral. "The East Wing is closed, Your Grace. Has been for nearly a decade. Water damage from a roof leak. The Duke hasn't allocated funds for repairs. Hadn't or couldn't." Alara was beginning to understand just how deep the Ashford financial problems ran. The staff were assembled in the servants' hall, 37 people who kept this massive house running. They lined up for inspection like soldiers, everyone from the butler, Mr. Graves, appropriately named, who looked like he'd been carved from granite, to the youngest scullery maid, no more than 14, terrified. Alara walked the line, learning names she knew she'd forget and relearn a dozen times. She paused at each person, asked a question, or made a comment. She'd learned from her mother that people who feel seen work harder. "You've been with the family long?" she asked Mr. Graves. 42 years, Your Grace. Served the old Duke before this one." "Then you've seen this house through good times and difficult ones." Something flickered in his stony face. "Yes, ma'am. I hope to see it through better times ahead, with your help, of course." "Of course, Your Grace." She continued down the line. The cook, Mrs. Bradford, looked perpetually worried. "I wasn't sure what you preferred for breakfast, ma'am. I prepared several options. Whatever the house normally has is fine. I'm not difficult." Relief flooded the woman's face. "Thank you, Your Grace. The old Duke had very particular tastes. Very particular." "Well, I'm not the old Duke." A few of the younger staff exchanged glances, testing the new waters, figuring out what kind of mistress they'd landed. Alara finished the inspection and turned to address them all. "I know I'm new here," she said clearly. "I know I'm not what you expected, but I'm your Duchess now, and this is my home as much as it's the Duke's. I expect honesty, hard work, and discretion. In return, I'll be fair. If you have concerns, bring them to Mrs. Fairweather or to me directly. I'm not interested in ruling through fear." She let that sink in. "That's all. Thank you for the welcome. Back to work." They dispersed, whispering among themselves. Mrs. Fairweather looked quietly pleased. "That was well done, Your Grace." "Was it? I have no idea what I'm doing." "None of us do at first, but you'll learn, and they'll teach you if you let them." The rest of the day was a blur of account books, supply inventories, and Mrs. Fairweather's patient explanations of how the household ran. Alara had thought her education in her father's business would prepare her for estate management. She'd been wrong. This was different. Part logistics, part politics, part theater. Every decision had ramifications that rippled outward. "The laundry rotation is every Monday and Thursday," Mrs. Fairweather explained, pointing to a ledger. "The groundskeepers report to Mr. Hendricks. You'll meet him tomorrow. The game warden is complaining about poachers again. The tenants in the North Quarter are behind on rent because the harvest was poor. The chimney in the blue bedroom needs sweeping. The Duke's horse threw a shoe yesterday, and the farrier is asking about payment terms." It went on, 1,000 small crises, each one requiring attention. "How did the previous Duchess handle all this?" Alara asked. Mrs. Fairweather's expression went carefully blank. The old Duke was widowed 30 years ago, Your Grace. Since then, the Duke has managed on his own. By which you mean he's ignored most of it. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. By evening, Alara's head was spinning. She took dinner alone in her sitting room, Rowan still hadn't returned from town, and tried to process everything she'd learned. The estate was in worse shape than she'd realized. Not falling apart exactly, but stretched thin, deferred maintenance everywhere. Staff making do with equipment that should have been replaced years ago. Tenants struggling with outdated farming methods because there was no capital to invest in improvements. Her family's money was supposed to fix this. That was the whole point of the marriage. But now, looking at the scope of the problems, she wondered if it would be enough. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Annie entered, looking worried. "Your Grace, there's a lady downstairs asking for you. She says she's Lady Hertford, and she won't leave until she speaks with you." Lady Hertford. Alara searched her memory. Ah, Rowan's aunt, technically her aunt now too. "Show her up to the drawing room. I'll be down in a moment." Alara checked her appearance in the mirror. She looked tired but presentable, and headed downstairs. Lady Catherine Hertford was standing by the fireplace, examining a portrait with the critical eye of someone who'd seen it 1,000 times and still found it wanting. She was in her late 50s, handsome rather than beautiful, dressed in black silk that suggested either mourning or just good taste. "Aunt Catherine," Alara said, using the title that was technically appropriate. "This is unexpected." "I'm sure it is. I wasn't at the wedding. I told Rowan I wouldn't attend another one of his disasters, but curiosity got the better of me." She turned, assessing Alara with sharp eyes. "So you're the brave fool who married my nephew." "I'm his wife, yes." "That's not the same thing as marrying him, dear. Marriage implies partnership. What you've done is chain yourself to a sinking ship." Alara kept her face neutral. "That's a harsh assessment." "It's an honest one. Sit down. You look exhausted, and we need to talk." They sat. Lady Hertford didn't wait for tea to be offered. "I'll be blunt," she said. "Rowan is an idiot. A well-educated, aristocratic idiot, but an idiot nonetheless. He spent the last 5 years tangled up with Victoria Lennox, who is a viper with good breeding and no conscience. The whole affair is common knowledge, which means you're walking into a situation where everyone pities you before you even open your mouth." "Do you understand what that means?" "I'm aware of the situation." "Are you?" "Because most young women in your position would either collapse or flee. You don't look like you're doing either." "I'm not." Lady Hertford smiled, a real smile, not the polite society version. "Good. Because the Ashford name needs someone with spine. It's been run by men with titles and no sense for too long. My father was a gambler, my brother was a drunk. Rowan is—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Lost. He's been lost since his father died and left him with debts he never asked for and a legacy he can't live up to." "That's very sympathetic, but it doesn't excuse anything." "I'm not offering excuses, I'm offering context. There's a difference." Lady Hertford leaned forward. "Victoria Lennox is the daughter of a marquis. She's been in love with Rowan since they were children. When his father died and the debts came due, she offered to marry him and bring her family's fortune into the fold. But her father refused, said the Ashfords were too far gone, not worth the investment. She's never forgiven Rowan for not being worth saving. So this is revenge? This is holding on to something she thinks belongs to her. And Rowan, fool that he is, feels guilty enough about the whole thing that he can't cut her loose." Alara processed this. It didn't change anything, but it did explain the strange desperation she'd seen in his face last night. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because someone needs to, and it clearly wasn't going to be him. You're not just fighting Victoria, girl. You're fighting the fact that Rowan doesn't think he deserves better than her. That's a much harder battle." "I didn't come here to battle anyone. I came here to fulfill a contract." "And how's that working out for you?" Alara met the older woman's eyes. "It's been 1 day." "Yes. And already you look like you've aged a year. This house will eat you alive if you let it. So here's my advice, for what it's worth. Don't try to make him love you. That's a losing game. Instead, make him respect you. Build something here that's yours, not his. Claim your space. Be so undeniable that even he can't ignore you. And maybe, if you're lucky and he's less of an idiot than I think, he'll wake up one day and realize what he almost threw away. And if he doesn't, then you'll still have built something worthwhile. Better than pining for a man who's too wrapped up in his own guilt to see what's right in front of him. Lady Hartford stood, adjusting her gloves. I'll be going, but I'll visit again if you'll have me. Someone needs to be on your side in all this, and heaven knows it won't be the society vultures. Thank you, Alara said quietly. I think. Don't thank me yet. You haven't survived the first month. After she left, Alara sat alone in the drawing room, staring into the fire. Make him respect you. Build something that's yours. Be undeniable. All right, then. If that's what it took, that's what she'd do. She'd come here expecting nothing. She'd gotten less than nothing. But somewhere in the humiliation and anger, something else was growing. Not hope. She wasn't that naive. But determination. The cold, hard determination that came from being underestimated. They thought she'd break or flee. Instead, she was going to become the best goddamn Duchess Ashford Manor had ever seen. And if her husband woke up one day and realized what he'd thrown away, well, that would be his problem, not hers. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened faster than anyone expected. Alara woke the next morning with a clarity that felt almost surgical. No more tears, no more shock, just cold, methodical planning. If she was going to survive in this world, she needed to understand it first. Every rule, every expectation, every weak point. She started with the account books. Mrs. Fairweather brought them to her study, a small room off the library that had apparently belonged to Rowan's grandmother decades ago. It still smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. The ledgers were a mess. Entries made in 3 different hands, numbers that didn't quite add up, pages with corners folded down and cryptic notes scrawled in margins. The Duke handles the finances personally, Mrs. Fairweather explained, hovering near the door. Clearly not well. Alara flipped through pages, frowning. This entry here, £1,200 to miscellaneous household expenses in a single month. What does that even mean? The housekeeper shifted uncomfortably. I wouldn't know, Your Grace. But you suspect. It's not my place. Mrs. Fairweather, if we're going to work together, I need honesty. Not gossip, not rumors, just facts. Can you give me that? The older woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The Duke has certain obligations from before your marriage, debts that aren't recorded in the official books. Gambling debts? Some. Also investments that went poorly, loans taken out at unfavorable terms, and... She hesitated. And? There's a townhouse in the city, leased under a different name. The payments come from household accounts, but they're coded as maintenance expenses. Victoria's townhouse. Of course, Alara kept her face perfectly neutral. I see. And how long has this been going on? 3 years, Your Grace. 3 years of siphoning money from an already struggling estate to maintain a mistress in comfortable surroundings. Alara did the math in her head. That was easily £15,000. Money that could have repaired the East Wing twice over, or upgraded the tenant farms, or funded any number of actually useful projects. Thank you for your honesty, Alara said quietly. I won't mention we had this conversation. Mrs. Fairweather looked relieved. What will you do? For now, learn, watch, and wait for the right moment. She spent the next week buried in numbers. The estate's finances were even worse than she'd thought. The rents from tenant farms barely covered operational costs. The investments that should have provided income had been liquidated years ago to cover debts. Her family's money, £100,000 settled as part of the marriage contract, was already earmarked for creditors and essential repairs. There was nothing left over for improvements, for growth, for anything that might actually generate new revenue. Rowan had married her to save himself from bankruptcy. He'd gotten just enough rope to hang himself more slowly. She saw him rarely during those first weeks. He'd leave early for London, return late, sometimes not at all. When they did cross paths, at dinner, in the corridors, he was polite but distant. The cold formality of strangers forced to share space. You've been going through the accounts, he observed one evening. They were dining together in the small breakfast room rather than the formal dining hall. It felt less like theater that way. Someone should. Find any irregularities? Alara looked up from her plate. His tone was casual, but there was something watchful in his eyes. Nothing unexpected, she lied smoothly. Just getting familiar with how things run. The estate management is my responsibility, and the household is mine. The two overlap. I'm not challenging your authority, Rowan. I'm learning my job. He studied her, and she held his gaze without flinching. After a moment, he nodded and returned to his meal. How is Victoria? Alara asked, her voice light, conversational. Rowan's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Excuse me? Victoria Lennox. I assume you've been seeing her during your trips to London? I'm simply asking after her health. It's what civilized people do. The silence stretched thin and dangerous. She's well, he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. Good. I'm glad. Alara dabbed her mouth with her napkin. I meant what I said that first night. I don't care what you do in London, but I won't have her paraded through this house. Those are my terms. Terms, he repeated, something flashing in his eyes. Anger or maybe grudging respect, hard to tell. Yes, terms. We're both adults. We can manage this arrangement with a minimum of drama if we're honest about boundaries. And what are your boundaries exactly? Discretion, respect, and competence. I expect you to handle the estate finances properly, which means not bleeding money into vanity expenses while the tenant cottages have leaking roofs. Rowan set down his silverware very precisely. Careful. Or what? You'll divorce me? That would be inconvenient for both of us. Your creditors would descend like vultures and my family would be humiliated. We're stuck with each other, so we might as well make it work. You've changed, he said, and there was something almost curious in his tone. You were terrified at the wedding. I was angry at the wedding. There's a difference. But I've had time to think, and I've decided that being angry is useless. Being strategic is better. Strategic. He almost smiled. Almost. You sound like your father. I'll take that as a compliment. They finished the meal in silence, but it was different now. Not comfortable, but less hostile. A cold war instead of open conflict. The real changes started with the staff. Alara began having weekly meetings with the senior household members, Mrs. Fairweather, Mr. Graves, Mrs. Bradford the cook, Mr. Hendricks the groundskeeper, and Thomas the stablemaster. They gathered in the morning room every Monday, and she listened to their concerns, made decisions, delegated tasks. The scullery maids are complaining about the water pump, Mrs. Bradford reported. It's been sticking for months. They have to prime it 6 or 7 times before it works. How much to fix it? Alara asked. Maybe £10, Your Grace. But the Duke said there's no budget for repairs. There is now. Get it fixed this week. What else? They stared at her. I'm serious. What else needs attention? Slowly, hesitantly, they started talking. The laundry equipment was ancient. The kitchen stove smoked. 2 of the tenant cottages needed new roofs before winter. The stable loft had a leak. The garden fence was falling apart. 100 small problems, each one ignored because there was never enough money, and the Duke was always elsewhere. Alara made lists, prioritized, allocated funds from her own household budget, money her father had settled on her personally, separate from the marriage contract. It wasn't much, but it was something. You're spending your own money on the estate? Mrs. Fairweather asked, looking troubled. I'm investing in my home. There's a difference. Within 2 weeks, the changes were visible. The pump was fixed. The stove was repaired. The worst of the cottage roofs were patched. Nothing dramatic, but enough that the staff started looking at her differently. Not as an interloper, but as someone who actually gave a damn. She started visiting the tenant farms. Mr. Hendricks accompanied her on the first trip, clearly skeptical about bringing the new duchess into the muddy reality of agricultural work. They rode out on horseback. Alara in a practical riding habit, not the ridiculous side saddle contraption that most aristocratic women favored. You ride astride? Hendricks asked, surprised. My father believed in practical skills. You can't outrun danger sitting sideways. The tenant families were wary at first. Hard not to be when a duchess shows up at your door. But Alara didn't stand on ceremony. She walked through their fields, asked about crop yields, inspected the irrigation systems, listened to their problems. The seed quality has been poor the last 2 years, one farmer explained. A weathered man named John Merrick, with calloused hands and tired eyes. We're planting more, but harvesting less, and the market prices keep dropping. Hard to make the rents, Your Grace. What would fix it? Better seed stock, new equipment. Ours is 20 years old, breaks down constantly. And maybe rotating the crops different, but that's risky. If it fails, we lose everything. Elara made notes, talked to every family. By the end of the day, she had a clear picture. The tenant farms were failing not because the farmers were incompetent, but because they were trapped in outdated methods with inadequate resources. This could be fixed, she told Hendricks on the ride back. Would take capital, Your Grace. Significant capital. How much? He named a figure. It was substantial, more than she had access to personally. But maybe if she was clever about it, she could find the money elsewhere. Her father's business contacts, perhaps. Investors who'd take a share of future profits in exchange for upfront funding. It was risky. It meant putting her own reputation on the line, using her family connections for estate business. But it was also the kind of long-term thinking that nobody else seemed to be doing. She started drafting proposals that night. Rowan found out about the tenant visits 3 days later. He cornered her in the library and he was actually angry, the first real emotion she'd seen from him beyond cold politeness. You went to the farms without consulting me? Elara looked up from her writing desk. I visited our tenants. I wasn't aware I needed permission to tour my own estate. They're not your tenants, they're mine. They're ours. We're married, remember? What's yours is mine under law. Or did you forget that part when you were signing the contracts? You don't understand how this works, then explain it to me. She set down her pen, gave him her full attention. Because from what I can see, your management strategy has been benign neglect. You collect rents, make no improvements, and wonder why revenues keep declining. That's not management. That's just slow-motion failure. His jaw tightened. I've been dealing with debts you can't possibly understand. Debts of £43,000 to 7 different creditors, not counting the informal loans. I've seen the books, Rowan. All of them, including the ones you hide in your study. He went very still. You went through my private papers? I went through estate documents that affect our shared financial position. If you wanted privacy, you shouldn't have married me. You had no right. I had every right. My family's money is the only thing keeping this estate from auction. That gives me the right to know where it's going. And what I've found is that you're managing to fail even with £100,000 of new capital because you're still making the same mistakes your father made. The words landed like slaps. Rowan's face went white, then red. Get out, he said quietly. This is the library. It belongs to both of us. I said get out. No. They stared at each other. Elara felt her heart pounding but kept her face calm. This was the moment, the line in the sand. If she backed down now, she'd never recover the ground. You want me out of your life? She continued, her voice level. Fine. Divorce me. Return my family's money and release me from this contract. I'll go quietly. But if I'm staying, then I'm staying as your equal partner, not as decoration. Your choice. Rowan looked like he wanted to throw something, or maybe hit something. His hands were clenched so tight the knuckles were white. You're impossible, he finally said. I'm necessary. There's a difference. He left without another word, slamming the door hard enough that books rattled on their shelves. Elara let out a shaky breath and returned to her proposals. Her hands were trembling now that he was gone, adrenaline catching up with her. But she'd held her ground. That was what mattered. Lady Hertford visited again the following week, this time announced properly, and received in the drawing room with tea. You've been busy, the older woman observed, accepting her cup. The staff are talking, the tenants are talking. Even some of my London friends have heard that the new Duchess of Greymont is making waves. I'm making improvements. You're making enemies. Rowan's not happy about being shown up. Rowan isn't happy about anything. At least now he's unhappy about something productive. Lady Hertford laughed, a sharp, genuine sound. Fair enough. But be careful. Victoria's noticed too. She was at Lady Pemberton's card party last night, making sure everyone knew that you're playing at being Duchess while she still has Rowan's heart. Let her talk. She's more dangerous than you think. Her family is powerful, and she's petty enough to use that power. What can she actually do? Rowan married me. The contracts are signed. She's just noise at this point. Noise can be damaging, especially in our world where reputation is everything. Elara set down her teacup carefully. Then I'll have to build a reputation louder than her rumors. And how do you plan to do that? By being so competent, so undeniably effective that nobody can dismiss me as just a merchant's daughter playing dress-up. I'm going to turn this estate profitable. I'm going to modernize the tenant farms. I'm going to make Ashford Manor relevant again. And I'm going to do it whether Rowan helps me or not. Lady Hertford studied her with something that looked almost like pride. You know what? I think you might actually pull it off. I don't have a choice. It's this or accept being humiliated for the rest of my life. I'd rather die. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. The weeks blurred together. Alara worked from dawn until well past midnight most days, learning everything she could about estate management, agricultural economics, social politics. She wrote letters to her father's business associates, pitching investment opportunities in the tenant farms. She negotiated with suppliers for better prices on equipment and seed. She reorganized the household budget, cutting waste while maintaining quality. The results started showing, slowly but visibly. The tenant farms began producing better yields. The household ran more smoothly. Even the physical appearance of the manor improved. Fresh paint here, repaired stonework there, gardens that looked tended instead of abandoned. And through it all, Rowan remained distant. He watched her work with an expression she couldn't quite read, somewhere between resentment and reluctant admiration. They maintained their cold civility, dining together occasionally, attending social functions as a united front, but never anything more. Then her father's letter arrived. Alara was in her study when Annie brought it, the girl's face troubled. Your Grace, this came by special courier. The man said it was urgent. The handwriting on the envelope was her mother's, but shaky. Wrong. Alara broke the seal with numb fingers. Dearest Alara, your father collapsed 2 days ago. The doctors say it's his heart. He's stable now, but weak. They don't know if he'll recover. I didn't want to worry you, but he's asking for you. If you can come, please do. Soon. Your mother. The paper slipped from her hands. She was moving before she fully processed the decision, calling for her traveling cloak, ordering the carriage prepared, barking instructions to Mrs. Fairweather about household management in her absence. Your Grace, perhaps you should wait until morning, the housekeeper suggested gently. The roads at night. My father is dying. I'm not waiting. She was halfway down the main stairs when Rowan appeared from his study. What's the commotion? I'm leaving. My father is ill. I need to go to London immediately. Something shifted in his face. How ill? His heart. The doctors don't think... Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. I need to go. Rowan didn't hesitate. I'll come with you. You don't have to... I'm coming with you, he repeated, firmer this time. Give me 5 minutes to change. The journey to London took 4 hours in a carriage pushed faster than was probably safe. They sat across from each other in the dim interior, neither speaking. Alara stared out the window at darkness broken by occasional lamplight, trying to keep her mind from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. He's strong, Rowan said suddenly. Your father. I remember when we first met, he nearly negotiated me into the ground, took everything I had to hold my position. He's good at business. He's good at surviving. That's different. More useful. It was the kindest thing he'd ever said to her, and it broke something loose in her chest. A sob escaped before she could stop it. Sorry, she gasped, pressing her hand to her mouth. I'm sorry, Don't apologize. He's your father. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Rowan reached across the carriage and, after a moment's hesitation, took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, unexpected. They arrived at her family's London townhouse just after midnight. The windows were lit, servants moving with the hushed urgency that comes with serious illness. Her mother met them in the entrance hall, looking 10 years older than she had at the wedding. Alara, thank heavens! She embraced her daughter, holding on tight. He's upstairs. The doctor's with him now. Can I see him? Yes, but prepare yourself. He's very weak. Her father's bedroom was dim, curtains drawn, the air heavy with the smell of medicine and sweat. He lay propped up on pillows, his face gray, breath labored. But when he saw her, his eyes focused. There's my girl, he rasped. Alara knelt beside the bed, taking his hand. It felt fragile, papery. I'm here, Papa. Good. Needed to tell you something. He paused, breathing hard. The business. It's in trouble. Worse than I let on. Don't worry about that now. Listen. His grip tightened with surprising strength. Made some bad investments. Tried to fix it before the wedding. Couldn't. If I die, your mother won't have much. The creditors... Papa, stop. You're not dying. But even as she said it, she could see the truth in his eyes. He was dying. Maybe not today, but soon. Promise me, he whispered. You'll take care of her, your mother. She doesn't understand business. She'll need you. I promise. He relaxed slightly, nodded. Good. Good girl. Always knew you were strong, stronger than me. You're the strongest man I know. Was, past tense. He managed a weak smile. But you're going to be fine. Can see it in you. You'll survive that world, that cold world. You'll more than survive. You'll conquer. Papa, let me say it, while I can. I'm proud of you, Alara. So proud. She stayed with him through the night, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall with increasing difficulty. Rowan waited downstairs with her mother, asking the doctor quiet questions, arranging things with a competence she hadn't expected from him. Her father didn't die that night, or the next day, but he didn't improve either. He drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally lucid, mostly not. Alara stayed, managing her mother's grief, handling the practicalities, trying not to think about what came next. On the third day, Rowan found her in the library, staring at nothing. You should rest, he said. I can't. When's the last time you slept? She couldn't remember. It doesn't matter. It does. He sat down beside her, and this time when he took her hand, it felt less awkward, more natural. You're running yourself into the ground. That doesn't help him. Nothing helps him. He's dying, and there's nothing I can do, and his business is falling apart, and my mother is going to be left with nothing. And I can't. The words tumbled out faster and faster. I can't fix this. I can fix estate budgets and tenant farms and household management, but I can't fix this, and I hate it. I hate feeling useless. You're not useless. You're here. That's what he needs. It's not enough. It's all any of us can give. She looked at him then, really looked at him. There was something different in his face, gentleness maybe, or just exhaustion. He'd stayed too, these 3 days. He hadn't returned to London, hadn't gone to Victoria, hadn't complained about the disruption to his life. He'd just stayed. Why are you being kind to me? She asked. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Because you're my wife, he said finally. And because I'm beginning to realize I've been an ass. Beginning to? Don't push it. She almost laughed. Almost. Her father died 5 days later, early in the morning when the light was just beginning to gray the windows. Alara was with him. So was her mother. He went peacefully, a final breath that simply didn't have another following it. Alara didn't cry. Not then. She held her mother while her mother sobbed, made arrangements for the body, contacted the priest, handled everything that needed handling. The tears would come later, in private, when she could afford them. The funeral was 3 days after that. A respectable crowd attended, business associates, minor nobility, people who owed her father favors or money. Rowan stood beside her through the entire service, a solid presence. When it was over and the guests had dispersed with their empty condolences, he was still there. What happens now? Alara asked. They were in the townhouse drawing room, just the three of them, her, Rowan, and her mother. I'll need to go through his papers, her mother said, her voice hollow. Settle his affairs, though I don't know where to begin. I'll help you, Alara said. We'll go through everything together. They spent the next week drowning in paperwork. And the situation was worse than her father had implied. Much worse. He'd taken loans against the business, borrowed from people who charged interest rates that would make a banker weep, invested in ventures that had collapsed spectacularly. What had once been a thriving manufacturing concern was now barely solvent. Without her father's skill at juggling creditors and finding new opportunities, the whole thing would collapse within months. What do we do? Her mother asked, staring at the columns of debt. Alara looked at the numbers, her mind racing through possibilities. The business could be sold, but it wouldn't fetch enough to cover the debts, not with its current problems. They could try to run it, but neither of them had the expertise. They could declare bankruptcy, but that would destroy the family name completely. Or I have an idea, she said slowly, but you're not going to like it. At this point, I'll consider anything. What if we merged the business with Ashford Estate operations, use the manufacturing capacity to produce goods we could sell directly, agricultural equipment, household items, things the estate and tenants need anyway. Cut out the middlemen, control the whole chain from production to consumption. Her mother frowned. That would require significant reorganization. And capital, which we don't have. Alara looked at Rowan, who'd been quietly listening. Unless we could convince creditors to restructure the debt in exchange for partial ownership in the combined operation. You want to risk the Ashford name on your father's debts? Rowan asked, his voice carefully neutral. I want to build something that might actually work. Instead of two failing operations, one functional one. It's risky. But doing nothing is guaranteed failure. Rowan studied her. You've thought this through. I've been thinking about it for days. The estate needs equipment and goods. The business needs customers and stability. They could support each other. Or drag each other down. Yes, that's the risk. He stood, paced to the window, looked out at the London street. The silence stretched until Alara thought he'd refuse outright. All right, he said finally. Let's do it. Really? You've been right about everything else so far. The tenant farms, the household management, all of it. I'd be a fool to ignore you now. He turned back to face her. Besides, I'm tired of failing. If we're going to go down, might as well be trying something bold. It took 2 weeks to hammer out the details, but they did it. Restructured the debt, merged operations, created something new that was neither pure aristocratic estate nor pure manufacturing business, but a hybrid that might actually survive. When they finally returned to Ashford Manor, exhausted and uncertain, Alara felt different. The grief over her father was still raw, would be raw for a long time, but something else had shifted too. She and Rowan had worked together, actually worked together, for the first time, and it had felt possible, like maybe they could figure this out. Mrs. Fairweather met them at the door, looking troubled. Your Grace, there's been a situation while you were away. What kind of situation? Lady Lennox visited several times. She became quite insistent when told you weren't available. On her last visit, she made a scene in front of the staff. Alara felt Rowan go very still beside her. What kind of scene? He asked quietly. She claimed the Duchess had been keeping you away deliberately, that you'd been forced into accompanying her to London, that the Duchess was manipulating you and turning you against those who truly cared for you. She said quite a lot of things, Your Grace, none of them appropriate. Alara turned to look at Rowan. His face had gone cold, the warmth from the past few weeks evaporating. I'll handle this, he said. How? I'll talk to her. Make it clear that kind of behavior isn't acceptable. Talking hasn't worked before. I said I'll handle it. But before he could leave, Mr. Graves appeared, looking agitated. Your Grace, Lady Lennox is here, now. She's in the drawing room and refusing to leave until she speaks with the Duke. Alara and Rowan exchanged looks. Let me deal with this alone, he said. No. Alara, no, she repeated firmly. This is my house. She insulted me in front of my staff. If there's going to be a confrontation, I'm not hiding from it. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. All right then, together. They walked to the drawing room side by side. Victoria was standing by the fireplace, beautiful as always, but there was something unhinged in her eyes now, desperation dressed up as confidence. Finally, she said when she saw Rowan, I've been waiting for hours. Where have you been? I've sent 4 letters and gotten no response. She stopped abruptly when she saw Alara behind him. Oh, you brought your pet merchant. Victoria, Rowan said, his voice carrying a warning. Don't. Don't what? Don't state obvious truths? She's dragged you away from London for weeks, isolated you, probably filled your head with all sorts of lies about me. My father died, Alara said flatly. That's where we've been, at his funeral. Victoria paused, but only briefly. I'm sure that was very sad. But you can't use family tragedy to monopolize your husband's time indefinitely. Rowan, we need to talk, alone. No, Rowan said. Victoria blinked. What? No, we're not talking alone. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Alara. She's my wife. I'm the woman you love. You're the woman I used to know. There's a difference. Victoria's face went white, then red. You can't mean that. After everything we've been through, everything we've meant to each other, what we meant to each other ended when I signed my marriage contract. I should have made that clear from the start. I'm making it clear now. Because of her? Because some jumped-up manufacturer's daughter with more money than breeding thinks she can buy her way into your heart? Because I'm tired, Rowan said, and there was something almost broken in his voice. I'm tired of living in the past. Tired of guilt. Tired of pretending that what we had was ever real or healthy or anything other than two people clinging to each other because we were too afraid to be alone. That's not fair. Fair? He laughed, bitter and sharp. You want to talk about fair? You've spent 5 years telling me I wasn't good enough for your family's money, but just good enough for you to keep around. You've made sure everyone in society knows I'm your property, that I'm obligated to you, that you're doing me some kind of favor by continuing to care. That's not love, Victoria. That's ownership. I stayed when no one else would. You stayed because it gave you power over me, and I let you because I was too much of a coward to face my failures alone. But I'm done now. Done with the guilt, done with the obligation, done with you. Victoria stared at him like he'd struck her. You don't mean that. I do. I should have meant it years ago. This is her doing. Victoria turned her fury on Alara. She's poisoned you against me, probably in bed doing whatever merchants' daughters do to trap men. Stop. Rowan's voice cracked like a whip. I won't let you speak about my wife that way. Not in her house. Not anywhere. Your wife? She's a business arrangement. She's my wife, Rowan repeated. And she's been more of a partner in 3 months than you were in 5 years. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to stop coming to this estate. You're going to stop spreading rumors in London. And you're going to accept that whatever we had is over, truly, finally over. Victoria's composure cracked completely. You'll regret this. When she shows her true colors, when she gets tired of playing duchess and goes running back to her factory world, you'll regret choosing her over me. Maybe, but it'll be my regret to own, not yours. I loved you. You loved who you thought I should be. There's a difference. Victoria looked between them. Rowan standing firm, Alara silent but unyielding, and something in her broke. Or maybe hardened, hard to tell which. Fine, she said, her voice venomous. Have your merchant bride. Have your pathetic little life. But don't think this is over. You've humiliated me in front of servants, dismissed me like I'm nothing, chosen that over me. I won't forget that. Neither will society. Neither will I, Rowan said quietly. That's the point. Victoria swept out, her exit less dramatic than she probably intended, more just final. The silence after she left was absolute. Alara discovered she was shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline, from the sheer intensity of what had just happened. That was, she started. Necessary, Rowan finished. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were raw. I should have done it months ago, years ago. Why didn't you? Because I'm a coward who'd rather maintain a comfortable misery than risk an uncomfortable truth. He ran a hand through his hair. You were right. About all of it. I've been managing my life the way I managed the estate, through benign neglect and hoping problems solve themselves. And now? Now I'm going to actually try. Be a proper husband, partner, whatever this is supposed to be. Alara felt something loosening in her chest. Not quite hope, but maybe the possibility of hope. That's going to take work, she said carefully. I know. I'm not going to forget the wedding night, or the months of coldness. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. I know that too. They stood there, two people who'd been forced together by circumstance, looking at each other with new eyes. But we could try, Alara said finally. Couldn't we? Rowan nodded slowly. We could try. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even really a new beginning. But standing there in the drawing room where Victoria's perfume still lingered in the air like poison, it felt like something had shifted fundamentally. Like maybe, just maybe, they'd finally turned a corner. The trying turned out to be harder than either of them expected. Not because of grand dramatic conflicts, but because of the small, grinding reality of two people who'd spent months building walls trying to figure out how to dismantle them. They were polite at breakfast, cordial at dinner. They discussed estate business with the efficiency of business partners. But anything deeper, anything that required actual vulnerability, remained locked behind careful distance. "You're being too cautious with him," Lady Hartford observed during one of her visits. She'd become a regular presence at the manor, appearing every few weeks with unsolicited advice and surprising amounts of useful gossip. "You both are, dancing around each other like strangers at a ball." "We are strangers," Elara pointed out. They were in the conservatory, surrounded by the plants that someone, she still hadn't figured out who, tended with such obsessive care. "Marriage certificate doesn't change that." "Then stop being strangers. Take a risk. Make him take one too." "I've taken enough risks. Safe risks. Calculated ones. I'm talking about the kind that might actually hurt." Elara turned away, pretending to examine a fern. "I'm not interested in getting hurt again." "Then you're not interested in a real marriage, just a functional arrangement, which is fine, honestly. Most aristocratic marriages are exactly that. But don't pretend you're trying if you're not actually willing to try." The words stung because they were true. Elara had been holding back, protecting herself, and she could see Rowan doing the same, offering surface-level cooperation while keeping his real thoughts locked away. They were doing exactly what they'd always done, just with slightly better manners. Something had to change. The opportunity came from an unexpected source, an invitation to the Ashcroft Ball. The Ashcroft family held an annual event that was essentially the social event of the autumn season, attended by every important family in their circle, a showcase of wealth and status and careful political maneuvering. The invitation arrived 6 weeks after Victoria's dramatic exit, written in elaborate script on cream paper. "We're expected to attend," Rowan said, studying the card over breakfast. "Do you want to?" "Want has nothing to do with it. We have to. Absence would be noted, interpreted. As what? Shame, weakness, confirmation that the rumors are true." Elara set down her teacup. "What rumors?" Rowan hesitated, then sighed. "Victoria's been talking, to anyone who'll listen, about how I've been manipulated, how you've isolated me from my real friends, how the marriage is already failing. Most people are smart enough to take it with skepticism, but some believe her. Some want to believe her. Makes for better gossip." Elara felt anger spark in her chest, not at Rowan, but at the sheer pettiness of it all. "So we attend the ball and prove her wrong." "It's not that simple. Victoria will be there. So will everyone who's been speculating about our marriage. One wrong move, one moment of visible tension between us, and we confirm everything she's been saying. Then we don't give them that moment. Easier said than done." "Is it?" Elara leaned forward. "We've been professional with each other for months now. We can maintain that for one evening." "Professional isn't enough. They'll be watching for cracks, for any sign that we're not—" He stopped. "Not what?" "Not actually together. Not really married in any way that matters." The words hung between them, uncomfortably honest. "Then we pretend," Elara said. "For one night, we pretend to be what they expect to see. A united couple. Not in love, necessarily, but at least content. Can we manage that?" Rowan studied her, and something complicated moved behind his eyes. "We can try." The preparation for the ball consumed the next 2 weeks. Elara had gowns fitted, not the fussy, overly elaborate confections that most duchesses favored, but something elegant and deceptively simple in deep sapphire silk. Her mother, still living in London and slowly recovering from grief, sent her grandmother's diamonds, a necklace and earrings that had been in the family for 3 generations. "You'll be the most striking woman there," Annie said as she helped Elara dress the night of the ball. "I don't need to be striking, just adequate." "With respect, Your Grace, you've never been just adequate at anything." It was probably the most honest thing any servant had ever said to her. Elara found herself smiling despite her nerves. Rowan was waiting at the bottom of the stairs when she descended. He'd clearly put effort into his appearance, too. Perfectly tailored evening wear, his dark hair styled, looking every inch the aristocratic duke. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Appreciation, maybe. Or surprise. "You look beautiful," he said, and it didn't sound like obligation. You look presentable, Alara replied, keeping her tone light. Just presentable? I'm not going to inflate your ego before we've even left the house. He almost smiled. Almost. Fair enough. Shall we? The carriage ride to Ashcroft House took 40 minutes. They sat in silence for most of it, the tension building with every mile. Finally, Rowan spoke. There are rules to these things, unspoken ones. I'm listening. We'll be announced together. We'll greet Lord and Lady Ashcroft as a unit. We'll dance the first waltz together. It's expected. After that, we'll circulate separately for a while, but not too long, an hour at most. Then we reconvene, dance again, stay visible as a couple. When Victoria makes her move, and she will, we handle it together, unified front. You think she'll actually try something? I think she's been publicly humiliated and she wants revenge. So yes, she'll try something. We just need to not give her ammunition. Alara absorbed this. Anything else? Don't let anyone separate us through the whole evening. If someone tries to pull you aside for private conversation, decline, politely but firmly. It's a trap. You sound like you're preparing for battle. I am, so are you. He wasn't wrong. By the time they arrived at Ashcroft House, a massive estate that made Ashford Manor look modest, Alara's nerves were strung tight enough to snap. The ballroom was already crowded, hundreds of people in their finest, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Crystal chandeliers threw diamond light across marble floors. An orchestra played something elegant and forgettable. Every face turned as they were announced. The Duke and Duchess of Greymont. The whispers started immediately. Alara could feel eyes tracking them, assessing, judging. She kept her head high, her hand steady on Rowan's arm. Lord and Lady Ashcroft greeted them with calculated warmth, the kind that was friendly enough to be proper, but distant enough to allow flexibility depending on how the evening went. Duchess, how lovely to finally meet you properly, Lady Ashcroft said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. We've heard so much about your work on the estate. Quite innovative. Innovative. Code for unconventional, possibly inappropriate, definitely worth gossiping about. Thank you, Alara replied smoothly. I find there's no substitute for direct involvement. Indeed, though some might say a duchess has other responsibilities that should take priority. Fortunately, I'm capable of managing multiple responsibilities. It's a skill I learned in my father's business. The temperature in Lady Ashcroft's smile dropped several degrees. How practical of you. They moved on before it could escalate into actual hostility. Rowan guided her toward the dance floor as the orchestra began a waltz. You're antagonizing her, he murmured. She antagonized first. I just didn't roll over. This isn't a business negotiation. Everything's a negotiation. You taught me that. He didn't have an answer for that. They reached the dance floor and he turned to face her, offering his hand with formal precision. The waltz was technically perfect. They'd practiced, briefly, in the Manor's ballroom 2 days ago, an awkward afternoon of counting steps and avoiding eye contact. But here, with hundreds of people watching, they couldn't afford mistakes. Rowan's hand settled at her waist. She placed hers on his shoulder. The music swelled, and they began to move. Everyone's staring, Alara said quietly. Let them. We're giving them nothing to gossip about, except that we dance like strangers who learned the steps from a manual. We are strangers who learned the steps from a manual. That's not helping. Then stop thinking about them. Just follow my lead, Alara tried. But it was impossible to ignore the weight of all those eyes, all that judgment. She could see Victoria across the room, watching them with an expression that could freeze wine. Lady Pemberton was whispering to a cluster of other women, none of them bothering to hide their interest. You're tense, Rowan said. I wonder why. If I just what? Relax? Pretend this is normal? None of this is normal, Rowan. We're performing our marriage for an audience that wants us to fail. Then don't give them what they want. The waltz ended. Polite applause rippled through the room. They separated and Alara felt immediately exposed without his presence beside her. 1 hour, Rowan reminded her. Then we reconvene. He disappeared into the crowd. Alara took a glass of champagne from a passing servant and tried to look confident rather than abandoned. Lady Hertford found her within minutes. Well, that was sufficiently awkward, the older woman observed. We're trying. Trying isn't the same as succeeding. You looked like you were completing a business transaction, not dancing with your husband. What do you want from me? We're doing the best we can. Your best isn't good enough. Not here, not with these vultures. Lady Hartford's voice dropped. Victoria's been working the room since before you arrived, dropping hints, planting seeds. She's telling everyone that Rowan is miserable, that he's trapped, that you're a cold social climber using his title to legitimize your common blood. Alara's grip on her champagne glass tightened. Let her talk. She's doing more than talking. She's building a narrative. And if you don't counter it with something stronger, it'll become truth by consensus. What am I supposed to do? Declare my undying love in front of everyone? That would be as fake as anything Victoria's saying. Then find something true. Some moment of genuine connection, because right now, you're playing into her hands. Lady Hartford drifted away, leaving Alara standing alone, frustrated and increasingly angry. Not at Lady Hartford or even Victoria, but at the entire ridiculous situation. At a world where her competence meant nothing compared to whether she could convince a room full of aristocrats that her marriage was real. Duchess Greymont, a male voice said behind her. May I have this dance? She turned to find a man in his 30s, handsome in a practiced way, with the kind of smile that suggested he knew exactly how attractive he was. I don't believe we've met, Alara said carefully. Lord Edmund Thorne. I'm an old friend of Rowan's. We attended Cambridge together. Friend. The word set off warning bells, but she couldn't refuse without causing a scene. Of course, it would be my pleasure. They moved to the dance floor. Edmund was a better dancer than Rowan, smoother, more confident, clearly practiced, but there was something calculating in the way he held her, like he was testing boundaries. You've caused quite a stir, he said conversationally. The entire ton has been fascinated by you. Fascinated seems generous. Not at all. You're different, refreshing, some would say, though others find you threatening. Threatening how? You're competent, independent. You don't play by the expected rules. That makes people uncomfortable, particularly people like Victoria, who've built their entire identity around being the kind of woman men like Rowan are supposed to want. Alara said nothing, waiting to see where this was going. He's not happy, you know, Edmund continued, his voice dropping to a more intimate register. Rowan, I've known him long enough to recognize when he's pretending. And tonight, he's pretending. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I saw how he looked during that waltz, like he was fulfilling an obligation, not enjoying his wife's company. And who could blame him? You're obviously intelligent and capable, but those aren't the qualities that warm a cold bed. The insult was delivered so smoothly that it took a moment to fully register. When it did, Alara felt rage bloom white-hot in her chest. This conversation is over, she said, stopping mid-dance. Did I offend you? That wasn't my intention. Yes, it was. And you succeeded. Congratulations. Now, if you'll excuse me, She tried to pull away, but Edmund's grip on her hand tightened. Let go, Alara said quietly. Just hear me out. She said let go. Rowan's voice cut through the music like a blade. He appeared beside them, his face hard, dangerous in a way Alara had never seen before. Edmund released her hand immediately, stepping back. Rowan, I know exactly what you were doing, and you're done. I meant no disrespect. You meant every bit of disrespect, and we both know it. Get out of my sight before I forget we're in public. Edmund looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Rowan's expression stopped him. He bowed stiffly and retreated into the crowd. Rowan turned to Alara, his anger still visible but starting to bank. Are you all right? I can handle myself. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. The music was still playing, and they were still on the dance floor, still being watched by half the room. Rowan seemed to realize this at the same moment Alara did. Dance with me, he said, and it wasn't quite a question. We already danced. Dance with me again. He offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Alara took it. This time was different. There was no careful distance, no formal precision. Rowan pulled her closer than propriety strictly allowed, close enough that she could feel the tension in his body, the anger still coiled beneath his controlled surface. Edmund is an ass, he said. Always has been. I should have warned you about him. What did he want? To provoke me. Through you. He's been in Victoria's pocket for years. She probably put him up to it. To what end? To make me lose my temper in public. to create a scene, to prove that our marriage is unstable. Alara absorbed this. Did it work? Almost. They moved in silence for a few measures, but it wasn't the awkward silence from before. This was charged, electric with something Alara couldn't quite name. Thank you, she said finally, for intervening. I wasn't intervening, I was... He paused, searching for words. You're my wife. That means something, even if I've done a poor job showing it. Rowan, let me finish. I've been thinking about what you said, about trying, about being partners, and I realized I've been going about it all wrong. I've been treating this like another obligation to manage, something to endure, but that's not fair to either of us. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to actually try, not just professionally, not just for appearances, actually try to make this work, make us work. Alara's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. That's a big commitment. I know, and I'm not saying I'll be perfect at it. I'm probably going to mess up constantly, but I'd rather fail at trying than succeed at pretending. The waltz ended. The music shifted into something slower, more intimate. They should have left the dance floor. Protocol demanded it, but neither of them moved. One more dance, Rowan said, and this time it definitely wasn't a question. They stayed there, moving together, while the room continued to watch and whisper. But Alara found she cared less about the audience now. Something had shifted between them. Some wall had cracked, and she was afraid that if they stepped apart, it would rebuild itself. That's when Victoria made her move. She appeared beside them on the dance floor, her partner, some earl or another, conveniently positioned to interrupt. Rowan, darling, she said brightly, her voice carrying, we simply must talk. It's been too long. Victoria, his voice was flat. We have nothing to discuss. Oh, don't be like that. I'm willing to forgive our little misunderstanding. Surely we can be civil for old time's sake. There's nothing to forgive because there's nothing between us. We've had this conversation. Victoria's smile tightened. I think you're confused. The stress of sudden marriage, managing all those debts, dealing with such a demanding wife. It would confuse anyone. Several nearby couples had stopped dancing to listen. The music continued, but the real performance was happening right here. I'm not confused, Rowan said clearly. I'm married to Alara. And whatever you and I had, if we ever really had anything, it's over, has been for months. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trapped, going through motions, pretending everything is fine when everyone can see you're miserable. The only thing I'm miserable about is having this conversation in public. Again. Then let's speak privately, just 5 minutes. Let me remind you what real connection feels like. No. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. You're choosing her? Really choosing her? Over everything we were to each other? Alara had stayed silent through this entire exchange, letting Rowan handle it, but now she felt compelled to speak. He's not choosing between us, she said quietly. He's choosing his own dignity, something you seem determined to strip from him. Victoria's eyes snapped to her, full of venom. You have no idea what you're talking about. You've known him for months. I've known him for years. And in all those years, did you ever actually see him, or just see what you wanted him to be? How dare you? I dare because I'm his wife. Because I've spent months watching him struggle under the weight of obligations and expectations and guilt that you helped pile on. You claim to love him, but love doesn't trap people. It doesn't manipulate them. It doesn't publicly humiliate them to satisfy wounded pride. The crowd around them had grown, people openly listening now. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Alara knew this was exactly the scene Victoria had wanted, but she couldn't stop. You're right that I haven't known him as long as you have, Alara continued, but I know him well enough to see that he deserves better than being someone's emotional hostage. Better than being guilted into maintaining a relationship that makes him miserable. And definitely better than being ambushed at a ball by someone who can't accept that he's moved on. Victoria's face had gone white, then red. You smug little... That's enough. Rowan's voice cut through whatever Victoria was about to say. He turned to face her fully, his expression carved from ice. Alara's right, about all of it. I've let guilt and habit keep me tied to something that should have ended years ago. But it's ending now. Publicly, clearly, so there can be no more confusion. We're done, Victoria. We've been done. And if you continue to spread rumors, continue to interfere in my marriage, continue to make scenes like this, I will make sure every person in this room knows exactly why we're not together. And it has nothing to do with Alara and everything to do with you. Plus, the threat hung in the air, unspecified but clearly serious. Victoria looked genuinely shocked, like she'd never considered that Rowan might actually have ammunition against her. You wouldn't, she said, but her voice wavered. Try me. For a long moment, they stood frozen. Victoria calculating, Rowan implacable, Alara barely breathing. The entire ballroom had gone silent, everyone watching this private war become public spectacle. Finally, Victoria laughed. It was a brittle, artificial sound. How dramatic. Fine. Have your merchant bride, have your pretend happiness. But don't come crying to me when reality sets in and you remember what you gave up. She turned on her heel and swept away, her partner scrambling to follow. The silence after she left was deafening. Then slowly, carefully, Lord Ashcroft began to clap. Just a few measured claps, but they echoed in the quiet. One by one, others joined in. Not enthusiastic applause, but acknowledgement. Validation, even. The orchestra started playing again, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. Conversations resumed. The social machinery restarted, already processing what had just happened and determining how it would be remembered. Rowan took Alara's hand. His grip was tight, almost painful. Let's get out of here, he said quietly. They didn't run, that would have been undignified, but they left quickly, offering hasty goodbyes to their hosts and escaping to their carriage before anyone could corner them for questions or congratulations or whatever the hell people wanted to say. The carriage pulled away from Ashcroft House. Inside, in the dim privacy of lamplight through windows, Alara finally let herself shake. That was, she started. A disaster, Rowan finished. I was going to say bold. Bold is just another word for disaster when you're talking about high society. He ran his hands through his hair, destroying the careful styling. Tomorrow morning, every gossip in London will be retelling different versions of what just happened. We'll be the scandal of the season. Would you have preferred I stayed silent? No, that's the problem. You were right. Everything you said was right, and I should have said it all months ago instead of letting it build to this. He looked at her then, really looked at her. You defended me. Why? Because you're my husband. That's not a real answer. Alara considered her words carefully. Because you deserve defending. Because Victoria was wrong. And because I'm tired of watching you shrink yourself to fit other people's expectations. I'm not the only one who does that. What's that supposed to mean? You've been holding yourself back too. Playing the perfect duchess, managing everything, never asking for anything. Like if you're competent enough, professional enough, I'll eventually notice you're more than just a business arrangement. The observation landed like a physical blow. That's not... isn't it? Alara, you're brilliant. You're probably the smartest person I've ever met. You've taken a failing estate and turned it around in less than 6 months. You've navigated social waters that would have drowned most people. You've dealt with more grief and humiliation than anyone should have to handle. And through all of it, you've never once asked me for anything emotional, never demanded that I actually be present in this marriage beyond surface-level cooperation. What was I supposed to demand? You were in love with someone else. I was trapped by someone else. There's a difference. And I'm starting to realize that you were giving me space to figure that out, even though it meant you got nothing in return. Alara felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. Don't do this here. Why not? Because I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't have this conversation in a carriage in the middle of the night after we just created a social disaster. I can't parse whether you mean any of this or if you're just running on adrenaline from the confrontation. I can't trust that tomorrow won't look different when everything settles. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he shifted across the carriage to sit beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You're right, he said softly. This isn't the time, but soon. We need to actually talk, Alara. Really talk. No performance, no audience, no walls. Just us figuring out what the hell we're doing. That sounds terrifying. It is terrifying, but I think it's necessary. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it wasn't the cold silence of strangers. It was the quiet of two people who'd just fought a battle together and were too exhausted to process what it meant. When they arrived back at Ashford Manor, Mrs. Fairweather was waiting with terrible news. "Your Grace," she said, her face grave. "A writer came from London an hour ago. It's your mother. She's been taken ill, very ill. The doctors think—" She hesitated. "They think you should come immediately." Alara felt the world tilt. First her father, now her mother. The universe seemed determined to strip away every anchor she had. "I'll get my things," she said, her voice mechanical. "I'm coming with you," Rowan said. "You don't have to—" "I'm coming with you," he repeated firmly. "No arguments." Within 20 minutes, they were back in the carriage, racing toward London for the second time in as many months. But this time felt different. This time, Rowan held her hand in the darkness, and Alara let him, because the alternative was facing this alone. And she'd done enough things alone. Her mother was dying in the same bedroom where her father had died 3 months earlier. Some cruel symmetry in that, Alara thought, as she climbed the stairs 2 at a time, Rowan close behind her. The same smell of medicine and sickness. The same hushed atmosphere of a household waiting for the inevitable. But this time, her mother was conscious, weak, frighteningly pale, but awake. "Alara," her voice was barely a whisper. "You came. Of course I came." Alara took her mother's hand, shocked by how fragile it felt, like bird bones wrapped in paper-thin skin. "What happened?" "Her heart," the doctor said from the corner of the room. He was the same physician who'd attended her father, looking even more tired now. "It's been failing for weeks, apparently, but she refused to let anyone contact you. Didn't want to worry you," she said. Then, this evening, she collapsed. "Can you fix it?" The doctor's expression answered before his words did. "We can make her comfortable, that's all. I'm sorry, Your Grace." Alara felt Rowan's hand settle on her shoulder, steadying. She wanted to rage at the unfairness of it all. Both parents gone within months, leaving her alone. But her mother was watching her with those 2 bright eyes, and she couldn't fall apart. Not yet. "How long?" she asked quietly. "Days. Maybe a week if she's strong." "I'm right here," her mother said with a ghost of her old acerbity. "Stop talking about me like I'm already gone." "Sorry, Mama." Her mother's gaze shifted to Rowan, assessing even now. "You came with her." "Yes, ma'am." "Good. She needs someone. Stubborn girl never admits it, but she does." Her breathing was labored, each word an effort. "Alara, I need to tell you something. About the business. About what your father did." "Mama, you should rest." "I'll rest soon enough. Listen." She gripped Alara's hand with surprising strength. "Your father made a deal before he died. With someone I didn't trust. A man named Marcus Holloway. Promised him controlling interest in the company if Holloway would clear some of the debts. I found the papers yesterday. That's when—" She trailed off, gasping. Alara's mind raced. Marcus Holloway was an industrialist with a reputation for buying struggling businesses, stripping them for parts, and selling the pieces for profit. If he got control of her father's company, the same company she'd just merged with the Ashford estate operations, he could destroy everything she'd built. "Did father sign anything?" she asked urgently. "I don't know. The papers are in his study. I was trying to find them when I collapsed. Alara, if that man takes the company, he'll ruin it. And you with it. The merger you arranged." "I'll handle it," Alara said firmly, though she had no idea how. "Don't worry about this now." "How can I not worry? It's all I'm leaving you. Problems and debts, and one terrible final gift from your father, who loved you but was a fool about money." "He did his best. His best wasn't good enough. Neither is mine. I should have been stronger, should have protected you better. Instead, I taught you to smile and accommodate and never make waves. And look where that got you. Married to a man who didn't want you, trapped in a world that sees you as an interloper." "Mama?" "Let me say it while I can. I was wrong. About all of it. You were never supposed to be decorative. You were meant for more. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you that every single day." Tears were streaming down Alara's face now, unstoppable. "You told me enough." "I didn't. But maybe you figured it out anyway. You're stronger than I ever was. Than your father was. Don't let anyone take that from you. Promise me." "I promise." Her mother's eyes drifted closed. "Good girl. Now let me sleep a bit. So tired. The doctor checked her pulse, adjusted her pillows. She needs rest. You should too, Your Grace. There's nothing more to be done tonight. Alara didn't want to leave, but Rowan gently pulled her from the room. She's right, he said quietly. You need rest, and we need to find those papers. They found them an hour later, buried in a drawer of her father's desk under stacks of correspondence. The contract was exactly as her mother had described. Controlling interest in the company transferred to Marcus Holloway in exchange for assumption of specific debts. It was dated 2 weeks before her father's death, but it wasn't signed. He couldn't do it, Alara said, staring at the unsigned signature line. Even desperate, even dying, he couldn't bring himself to sign over his life's work to a vulture like Holloway. That's good for us. Is it? The debts are still there. Holloway will know about this deal. He'll come calling, demanding we honor it or pay up immediately. And we can't do either. Rowan studied the papers, his expression thoughtful. What if we don't do either? What? What if we restructure everything? Use the merger you created as leverage. Show that the business is now part of a larger operation, the Ashford estate, and therefore any deal made with the independent company is void. The entity your father would have signed over doesn't exist anymore. Alara felt a spark of hope. That's actually brilliant. Legally complicated, but possible. Your father's creditors agreed to the merger because it gave them better odds of eventual payment. Holloway wasn't part of that negotiation. He has no claim on the new structure. He's not going to accept that. Of course not. He'll fight. But we'll be fighting from a stronger position than your father was, and we'll have something he doesn't expect. What's that? You. He's expecting a widow and her aristocratic son-in-law, easy targets. He's not expecting the woman who turned around Ashford Manor in 6 months. Alara managed a small smile. You think I can outmaneuver an industrial shark? I think you already have been for months. He's just one more problem to solve. They worked through the night, drafting responses, identifying legal strategies, preparing for the confrontation they both knew was coming. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, they paused for coffee brought by a worried housemaid. You should sleep, Rowan said, watching Alara rub her eyes. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see her in that bed, looking so small. Both my parents, Rowan, both of them, and I'm 22 years old. I'm not ready to be an orphan. Nobody ever is. Were you? When your father died? He was quiet for a moment. I thought I was. We hadn't been close. He was disappointed in me most of my life, and I resented him for it. When he died and left me with impossible debts and expectations I could never meet, part of me felt vindicated. See, I was right to resent him. But mostly, I just felt lost. Like I'd been waiting my whole life for his approval, and now I'd never get it. Is that why you stayed with Victoria? Because she made you feel less lost? Maybe. Or maybe I just didn't know how to be alone with my failures. He reached across the desk, covered her hand with his. I'm sorry. For all of it. For not being what you needed when you needed it. You're here now. That's a low bar. It's higher than you think. They sat there in the quiet, hands touching across scattered papers. Two people who'd started as strangers and were slowly, painfully, becoming something else. Her mother died 3 days later, quietly in her sleep. Alara was with her, had barely left the room. When the doctor confirmed what they all already knew, she didn't cry. She just sat there, holding her mother's cooling hand, feeling the last anchor to her old life slip away. The funeral was smaller than her father's. Fewer people felt obligated to attend. But those who came were genuine. Business associates who'd respected her mother's grace under pressure, a few friends from her parents' early years, Lady Hartford looking appropriately somber. Marcus Holloway showed up uninvited. He was a large man in his 50s, expensively dressed, but with the coarse edges of someone who'd clawed his way up rather than being born into position. He approached Alara after the service, his expression calculatedly sympathetic. Duchess, my condolences. Your mother was a remarkable woman. You didn't know her. I knew your father. We had business together. Uncompleted business. He never signed your contract. Holloway's sympathy evaporated into something colder. A technicality. We had an agreement. Agreements require signatures. This is neither the time nor place for this conversation. Then when? Because those debts your father promised me don't wait for convenient timing. Rowan appeared at Alara's side, his presence solid and unmistakably hostile. The lady asked you to leave. And who are you? The titled husband who married her for money? I know all about the Ashford situation. Drowning in debt, desperate for her father's capital. You have no room to negotiate from. We're not negotiating, Alara said coldly. The business your contract referenced no longer exists. It's been merged into Ashford estate operations. Any claims you think you have died with my father? Holloway's face darkened. You can't restructure away from legitimate debts. I can and I did. The creditors your contract was supposed to satisfy have already accepted new terms under the merged entity. You were never part of those negotiations, which means you have no standing. Check with your lawyers if you doubt me. You think you're clever, playing with legal structures like you know what you're doing. But I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, little girl. And I don't lose. Then I suppose there's a first time for everything. Holloway stepped closer, deliberately invading her space. I could destroy you. Make your life so difficult, you'll beg me to take that company off your hands. Rowan moved between them, his voice deadly quiet. Touch my wife. Threaten her again, even look at her wrong, and I will bury you. I have connections you can't imagine, favors you don't know about, and absolutely nothing to lose. Test me if you want. I'd actually enjoy it. For the first time, Holloway looked uncertain. He'd expected easy targets, a grieving woman and her weak aristocratic husband. Instead, he'd found something that looked a lot like unified steel. This isn't over, he said, retreating. Yes, it is, Alara replied. You just don't know it yet. He left, and Alara felt her knees weaken. Rowan caught her elbow. That was well done, he said. That was terrifying. You didn't show it. I'm very good at not showing things. They stayed in London for another week, settling her mother's affairs. The townhouse would have to be sold. They couldn't afford to maintain it. Her mother's personal belongings were packed, distributed to relatives or kept for sentimental value. It was exhausting, depressing work, made bearable only by Rowan's constant presence. He didn't hover. He just existed beside her, handling practical details, making decisions when she was too tired to think, catching her when grief ambushed her unexpectedly. They fell into a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Morning coffee together, evenings reviewing paperwork, nights where they talked about anything except death and debt. Tell me something about your childhood, Rowan said one evening. They were in the library, supposedly reviewing accounts, but mostly just sitting in comfortable silence. Why? Because I realized I don't actually know much about you. Not the real things. I know you're brilliant with numbers and terrifying in negotiations, but I don't know what you were like before all this. Before the strategic marriage and the responsibility. Alara thought back, trying to remember the girl she'd been. I wanted to be an architect. Really? I loved how buildings worked. The engineering of it, making something beautiful and functional at the same time. I used to draw designs for houses, imagining different ways to use space and light. My father thought it was a charming hobby. Never occurred to him I might actually want to do it as a profession. Why didn't you push for it? Because I was 13 when I realized what daughter of an industrialist actually meant in our world. I wasn't being educated to do anything. I was being prepared to marry well. Everything else was just decoration. That's depressing. That's reality. Or was. Now I don't know what I am anymore. Duchess? Business manager? Orphan? All of the above? Rowan was quiet for a moment. You're someone who's rebuilding her entire life while grieving two parents and managing a hostile takeover attempt. That's what you are. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing an incredible job. I don't feel incredible. I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's what incredible looks like when you're in the middle of it. The put-together part comes later, in retrospect, when you can pretend you knew what you were doing all along. Alara laughed despite herself. Is that what you do? Every single day. They returned to Ashford Manor 2 weeks after her mother's death. The estate felt different somehow, smaller, more manageable. Or maybe she was just seeing it through different eyes after everything that had happened. Mrs. Fairweather greeted them at the door with news both good and concerning. The tenant farms are doing well, Your Grace. The harvest is the best we've had in 5 years. Mr. Hendricks wants to discuss expansion plans, but there's been trouble. What kind of trouble? Victoria Lennox has been writing letters to our suppliers, to tenants, to anyone who does business with the estate. spreading rumors that the Duke is being controlled, that the estate finances are unstable, that people should be cautious about continuing their relationships with Ashford operations. Alara felt tired anger settle in her bones. How much damage has she done? Some. 3 suppliers have ended their contracts. 2 tenant families are talking about leaving when their leases expire. Nothing catastrophic yet. But she's persistent. Of course she is. Alara looked at Rowan. How do we handle this? By proving her wrong, he said. Not with words, with results. If the estate is thriving, if our tenants are happy, if our suppliers see us as reliable partners, then her rumors become obvious lies. That takes time. Then we start now. They did. Alara threw herself into estate management with renewed focus. She visited every tenant family personally, not to reassure them, but to listen. What did they need? What would make their operations more successful? What problems had been ignored for too long? John Merrick, the farmer who'd been struggling with poor seed quality, approached her with an idea. Your Grace, what if we tried something different? There's new farming techniques from America, crop rotation, soil management, equipment that could double our yields. It's risky, but if it works, how much would it cost to implement? He named a figure. It was substantial, but not impossible. Do it, Alara said. I'll find the money. You find the expertise. You're trusting me with a lot. You've been farming this land for 20 years. I've been here less than 1. Of course I trust you. Word spread. The new duchess listened. The new duchess invested. The new duchess didn't just collect rents and disappear. She showed up, got her hands dirty, treated people like partners instead of subjects. Slowly, opinions shifted. The suppliers who'd left came back, sheepishly apologizing and offering better terms than before. The tenants who'd considered leaving renewed their leases. People started seeking out Ashford business rather than avoiding it. And through it all, Rowan stood beside her. Not managing her or controlling the narrative, but actually helping. He handled the aristocratic connections while she managed the practical operations. He smoothed over social complications while she fixed logistical problems. They became a functional partnership, and it showed. Lady Hertford visited 6 weeks after their return from London. The gossip has changed, she announced without preamble. You've gone from scandal of the season to talk of the season. People are impressed. People are fickle, Alara replied. True, but they're also observant. They see an estate that's thriving under your management. They see a marriage that looks increasingly functional, dare I say, genuine, and they see Victoria Lennox looking increasingly desperate and irrelevant. She's still spreading rumors. Of course she is, but nobody's listening anymore. She's become that person at parties, the one who won't stop talking about their ex, getting progressively more bitter while everyone else moves on. It's actually quite satisfying to watch if you enjoy schadenfreude. I don't. Liar, you absolutely do. You're just too polite to admit it. Alara smiled despite herself. Maybe a little. The real test came when Holloway made his next move. He'd been quiet for weeks, which should have been comforting, but instead felt ominous. Predators didn't give up, they just changed tactics. He showed up at the manor unannounced, which was his first mistake. His second was bringing lawyers and assuming he could intimidate his way to victory. Duchess, Duke, we need to discuss the debt situation. They were in the library, Alara's territory now, every ledger and contract organized with military precision. She didn't stand when Holloway entered, didn't offer him a seat. Mr. Holloway, this is unexpected. I've tried to handle this quietly, but you've left me no choice. The debts your father owed need to be satisfied. Either you honor his agreement with me, or I'll pursue legal action to claim what's owed. Alara glanced at Rowan, who nodded slightly. They'd been preparing for this. Let me show you something, she said, pulling out a ledger. This is the current financial status of the merged operations. Your father's manufacturing business integrated with Ashford Estate Management. As you can see, revenues have increased 40% in the last quarter. Efficiency is up. Costs are down. We're profitable for the first time in 3 years. That's irrelevant to the debts. It's completely relevant because those debts, the ones you claim are owed, they've been restructured under the new entity. Your contract was with a company that no longer exists. The creditors you were supposed to satisfy have already accepted new terms. You have no standing to claim anything. My lawyers disagree. Then let them disagree in court. We'll be happy to present our case to a judge. And while we're there, we'll discuss how you attempted to exploit a dying man's desperation to acquire a company for a fraction of its worth. I'm sure the judge will find that fascinating, as will the business press. Holloway's face darkened. You're threatening me? I'm stating facts. You saw an opportunity to profit from tragedy. It didn't work. That's not my fault. You think you can just dismiss me? I have resources, and we have something better, Rowan interjected. We have legitimacy, a functioning operation, partners who trust us, and most importantly, we have nothing to lose by fighting you publicly. Your reputation, on the other hand, he let the implication hang. One of Holloway's lawyers leaned in, whispered something urgent. Holloway's expression shifted from anger to calculation to, finally, resignation. What do you want? He asked. Nothing, Elara said. We want you to walk away and never contact us again. That's the deal. Take it or spend years in litigation that you'll eventually lose while destroying your reputation in the process. The silence stretched. Holloway was clearly doing the math, weighing options, hating every moment of it. Fine, he said finally, but this isn't over. You've made an enemy today. No, Elara corrected. You made an enemy 6 months ago when you tried to prey on my family's misfortune. Today, I'm just finishing what you started. After Holloway left, defeated, furious, but definitively gone, Elara felt something release in her chest, some coiled tension she'd been carrying since her father's death. We did it, she said, still slightly disbelieving. You did it, Rowan corrected. I just provided moral support and intimidating aristocratic presence. That's not nothing. It's also not what you did. You outmaneuvered someone with 10 times your experience and resources. You protected your family's legacy and kept the estate from being cannibalized. That's all you. Elara looked at him, this man who'd started as an obligation and was becoming something else entirely. We're a good team. We are. When did that happen? I don't know. Gradually, I think. And then all at once when I stopped being an idiot about it. You're still a bit of an idiot. Fair enough. But I'm your idiot now. Elara laughed, a real laugh, the first in weeks. I suppose you are. That evening, they had dinner together. Not the formal affairs they'd suffered through in the early days, but comfortable, easy. They talked about the estate, about expansion plans, about John Merrick's experimental farming techniques. They talked about London gossip that Lady Hartford had shared, about which suppliers were reliable and which needed replacing. They talked like partners, like people who knew each other. I've been thinking, Rowan said over dessert, about us. Elara's stomach tightened. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just honest. We've been through hell together these past few months. Your father's death, Victoria's drama, your mother's passing, Holloway's threats. We've handled all of it side by side, and we've been effective. But we've never actually talked about what we want this marriage to be. I thought we were figuring that out as we went. We are. But maybe it's time to be deliberate about it, to decide together instead of just reacting to crises. Elara set down her fork. What do you want it to be? Real, he said simply. Not a business arrangement, not a strategic alliance. A real marriage, with trust and honesty, and maybe, eventually, something that looks like love. That's a lot to ask. I know. And I'm not saying it happens overnight. I'm just saying I'm willing to try. Actually try, not just go through motions if you are. Elara studied him, this complicated, damaged, surprisingly decent man who'd come into her life as an obligation and was offering to be something more. I'm willing, she said carefully. But I need you to understand something. I won't be a passive wife who exists in your shadow. I won't give up the work I've built here just because that's what traditional duchesses do. If we're doing this, really doing this, it's as equals. I wouldn't want it any other way. You're terrifying when you're managing things. I'd be an idiot to interfere. And Victoria, is she really gone? She's really gone. I should have ended it years ago, but I was too caught up in guilt and habit. She represented everything I thought I should want. Turns out, what I actually want is someone who challenges me, frustrates me, and makes me better than I'd be alone. That's very romantic, Elara said dryly. Romance is overrated. Partnership is better. You're such a romantic. I'm learning. You're a terrible influence. They finished dinner, moved to the library, fell into their usual routine of reviewing ledgers and discussing plans. But something had shifted. Some fundamental understanding had clicked into place. Around midnight, as they were preparing to retire to their separate bedrooms, a habit neither had questioned despite everything, Rowan caught her hand. Elara? Yes? Thank you for not giving up on this. On us. You had every reason to. So did you. True. But I'm glad we didn't. He kissed her forehead, brief, chaste, but genuine, and headed to his room. Elara stood in the corridor, touching the spot where his lips had been, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The beginning of something that might eventually grow into that. She went to her own room, but for the first time since their wedding night, she didn't lock the connecting door. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable, but it was a beginning. The unlocked door stayed unlocked. Neither of them mentioned it. For 3 days, they went about their routines. Breakfast together, estate work, dinners that stretched longer than necessary because neither wanted to end the conversation. But at night, that door between their rooms remained open, a silent invitation neither had quite figured out how to accept. On the 4th night, Elara was reviewing contracts when she heard footsteps. Rowan stood in the doorway, hesitant in a way she'd never seen him before. "Can't sleep?" she asked. Something like that. He moved into the room, stopped at a respectful distance. "Can I sit?" "It's your house." "It's our house. There's a difference." He sat in the chair across from her desk. For a while, they just existed in comfortable silence, her reading, him watching the fire. Finally, he spoke. "I keep thinking about what you said, about being equals. I'm not sure I know how to do that." Elara set down her papers. "Neither do I, but we're figuring it out." "Are we? Or are we just being polite to each other and calling it progress?" "What do you want, Rowan? Really want, not what you think you should say." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was rough with honesty. "I want to stop sleeping in separate rooms. I want to wake up next to my wife instead of wondering if she's already awake and working without me. I want to stop pretending that this arrangement is enough when it's clearly not. But I also don't want to push, don't want to assume, don't want to be one more man making demands of you when you've had enough demands for a lifetime." Elara's heart was doing complicated things. "You're overthinking this." "Probably." She stood, walked around the desk, stopped in front of him. "I'm not fragile. I'm not going to break if you're honest about what you want. And I'm definitely not going to punish you for having feelings about your own marriage." "Then what do you want?" "I want to stop being so careful with each other. I want to take a risk that might actually hurt. I want—" She hesitated, then pushed through. "I want you to kiss me. Really kiss me. Not the obligatory wedding kiss or the friendly forehead thing. I want to know what it feels like when you're not doing it out of duty." Rowan stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Are you sure?" "Stop asking me if I'm sure. Just—" He kissed her. And it was nothing like the wedding kiss, nothing like anything that had come before. It was desperate and gentle at the same time. Months of tension and confusion and careful distance collapsing into this one moment. His hands settled at her waist, hers in his hair, and for the first time since they'd met, there was no performance, no audience, no walls. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elara felt tears on her cheeks and couldn't pinpoint exactly why. "That was," she started. "Overdue," Rowan finished. "I was going to say terrifying." "That too." They stood there, foreheads touching, neither quite ready to let go. "I don't know what I'm doing," Elara admitted quietly. "I've been so focused on surviving, on being competent, on proving I deserve to be here, that I forgot how to be vulnerable with someone." "Then we'll figure it out together, make mistakes together, be terrible at this together until we're less terrible." That's the worst romantic speech I've ever heard. I'm not good at romance, but I'm good at honesty. And honestly, Elara, I'm completely terrified and completely certain at the same time. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense. That night, for the first time, they didn't sleep in separate rooms. Nothing dramatic happened. They were both too exhausted and emotionally wrung out for grand gestures. They just existed in the same space, fell asleep in the same bed, and woke up the next morning tangled together in a way that felt surprisingly natural. "This is strange," Elara said, her head on his chest. Good strange or bad strange? Just strange. I'm not used to sharing space. We can go back to separate rooms if... Don't you dare finish that sentence. Rowan laughed, actually laughed, and Alara felt the sound vibrate through his chest. Noted. The changes weren't all smooth. They fought sometimes. Sharp, frustrated arguments about estate decisions or social obligations or the 1,000 small adjustments that come with actually building a life together. But they fought honestly now, without the careful distance that had characterized their early months. And they learned to apologize, which was harder than either expected. I was wrong, Rowan said one afternoon after a particularly heated argument about whether to invest in new equipment or save for unexpected costs. About dismissing your concerns, you were right to be cautious. I was also stubborn about refusing to see the bigger picture, Alara admitted. We both were. So what do? Compromise. Split the difference. Make a decision together instead of trying to win the argument. That's very mature of us. Don't get used to it. 3 months after that first unlocked door, the estate hosted its first major social event, a harvest celebration for tenants and local gentry. It had been Alara's idea, a way to showcase the improvements they'd made and strengthen community relationships. Rowan had initially resisted, worried about costs and logistics, but she'd convinced him it was an investment worth making. The day of the celebration, Ashford Manor was transformed. Tables lined the lawn, food prepared by Mrs. Bradford and her staff, music provided by local musicians. Tenants mingled with minor nobility, everyone united by genuinely good food and the satisfaction of a successful harvest season. John Merrick found Alara near the refreshment tent, looking both proud and slightly uncomfortable in his formal clothes. Your Grace, I wanted to thank you, properly. The new techniques you funded, our yield this year was double what we expected. Double. My family will be comfortable this winter for the first time in years. You did the work, John. I just provided resources. You provided trust. That's rarer than money. He hesitated, then continued. There was talk when you first arrived about how you didn't belong, how you'd never understand this life. I'm ashamed to say I believe some of it, but you proved us all wrong. You're the best thing that's happened to this estate in generations. Alara felt her throat tighten. That means more than you know. I'm not the only one who thinks it. Ask anyone here. You've changed this place, changed us. He drifted away to join his family, leaving Alara standing there feeling unexpectedly emotional. Rowan appeared at her elbow, offering a glass of wine. You all right? John Merrick just thanked me, genuinely thanked me. You've earned it. Have I? Sometimes I still feel like I'm pretending, like everyone's going to realize I have no idea what I'm doing and it'll all collapse. That's called imposter syndrome. Welcome to leadership. Everyone feels it. Even you, especially me. But then I look at what we've built, what you've built, and I realize it doesn't matter if I feel qualified. The work speaks for itself. The celebration continued into evening. Speeches were made, toasts offered. Lord Ashcroft, who'd attended out of social obligation, pulled Rowan aside for what looked like a serious conversation. When Rowan returned, he looked stunned. What did he say? Alara asked. He apologized for not taking us seriously at the ball, for believing Victoria's rumors. He said he's been watching what we've done here, and he's impressed. Wants to discuss potential partnerships. That's good, right? That's massive. Ashcroft is one of the most respected peers in the region. If he's publicly supporting us, it changes everything. We've arrived then, officially acceptable. More than acceptable. Respected. Alara should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt oddly deflated. Why doesn't it feel better? Because external validation doesn't fix internal doubts. We did this for us, for the estate, for people who depended on us. Whether the aristocracy approves is just noise. When did you become so wise? Around the time I married someone who forced me to grow up. The crowd began to thin as evening deepened into night. Alara and Rowan stood on the manor steps, watching people depart. Tenants tired but happy. Gentry impressed despite themselves. Everyone carrying away a piece of the community they'd built. We did this, Alara said quietly. You did this. We did this, she insisted. Stop trying to give me all the credit. You handled the political complications, managed the aristocratic relationships, dealt with people like Ashcroft so I could focus on operations. This is ours, Rowan. Together. He pulled her close, and she leaned into him, comfortable in a way that would have been impossible a year ago. "I'm glad you didn't give up on me," he said. "I'm glad you didn't give me reason to." The moment of peace was interrupted by Mrs. Fairweather, looking worried. "Your Grace, there's a situation. Lady Lennox is here." Alara felt Rowan tense beside her. "I thought she was in Paris." "Apparently she returned early. She's demanding to speak with you both. Says it's urgent." They found Victoria in the drawing room, and Alara was shocked by the change. She looked thinner, harder, with dark circles under her eyes and an edge of desperation that hadn't been there before. "Victoria," Rowan said carefully, "what are you doing here?" "I needed to see you, to talk to you without—" She glanced at Alara. "Alone. Please." "No," Rowan said firmly. "Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of my wife." "Don't be like that. After everything we meant to each other, what we meant to each other ended months ago. We've had this conversation." Victoria's composure cracked. "I made a mistake. I see that now. I was cruel at the ball, vindictive when you chose her. I tried to ruin you out of spite, and it backfired. I'm alone now. My reputation is destroyed. My father won't speak to me. I have nothing left." There was genuine pain in her voice, and despite everything, Alara felt a flicker of sympathy. "I'm sorry you're struggling," Rowan said, but his voice was distant. "But I can't help you, not the way you want." "I'm not asking you to leave her. I'm asking for friendship. For some acknowledgement that the years we spent together meant something, that I wasn't just a mistake you're grateful to be rid of. You weren't a mistake, but we were never right for each other. We were two people clinging together because we were afraid of being alone. That's not love, that's desperation dressed up as romance. And what you have with her is love. Really?" Rowan looked at Alara, and something passed between them. Not performance, not for Victoria's benefit, just truth. "Yes," he said simply. "It is." Victoria's face twisted, grief and anger and bitter acceptance all at once. "Then I've truly lost." "You never had me to lose. Not really. I'm sorry it took me so long to be honest about that." "Are you happy?" Victoria asked, the question directed at both of them. "Really happy, or just making the best of an arrangement?" Alara answered before Rowan could. "We're figuring it out, making mistakes and fixing them, learning to trust each other. It's messy and complicated and nothing like what anyone expected. But yes, we're happy." Victoria absorbed this, nodded slowly. "Then I suppose there's nothing left to say." "There's one thing," Rowan said. "I forgive you. For the rumors, the manipulation, all of it. Not because I'm noble or generous, but because holding on to anger at you was keeping me tied to the past. And I'm done living there." It was the kindest cruelty, offering forgiveness that simultaneously closed every door. Victoria understood immediately. "Goodbye, Rowan." "Goodbye, Victoria." She left quietly this time, no drama, no scenes. Just a woman who'd lost a battle she'd never really been equipped to win. After she'd gone, Alara turned to Rowan. "Was that true? What you said about love?" "Every word. I've been in love with you for months, probably, just too stupid to recognize it. You scared me, still scare me, honestly. You're so much stronger than I am, so much more capable. I kept thinking you'd realize you didn't need me. I do need you. Not the way Victoria needed you. Not as a crutch or a status symbol, but as a partner. Someone who challenges me, supports me, calls me out when I'm being ridiculous." "You're never ridiculous. I'm frequently ridiculous. You're just diplomatic about it." Rowan laughed, pulled her close, kissed her properly. "I love you," he said against her lips. "Probably should have led with that. I love you too. And you're right. Probably should have led with it." They stood there in the drawing room where so much had gone wrong, making it right with nothing but honesty and time. The months that followed weren't perfect. They still fought, still struggled with the weight of running an estate and managing complex business operations. But they fought as partners now, with the security of knowing that disagreement didn't mean disaster. The estate continued to thrive. John Merrick's experimental techniques proved so successful that other tenants adopted them. Revenue increased. The long-neglected East Wing was finally repaired. They began planning a school for tenant children, Alara's idea, something that would have been impossible a year ago, but now felt inevitable. Lady Hartford visited one spring afternoon, looking pleased with herself. "You've done it," she announced. "Become respectable. Boring, even. The gossips have moved on to juicier scandals." I'm devastated to be boring, Alara said dryly. You should be proud. Boring means stable. Stable means you've won. Won what? Everything. The estate is profitable. The marriage is genuine. You've proven every doubter wrong. That's called winning, dear. After Lady Hartford left, Alara found Rowan in the library. Their library, really, filled with both his collection and books she'd been accumulating on agriculture, business management, engineering. Lady Hartford says we're boring now, she reported. Good. I like boring. Do you? Really? He looked up from his correspondence. I like this. Us. Building something together. Is that boring? It's domestic. Same thing. Alara settled into the chair across from him, the same position they'd occupied countless times over the past year. I was thinking about something dangerous. Remember when I told you I wanted to be an architect before all this? I remember. What if I actually did it? Not professionally maybe, but for the estate. We need new tenant cottages. Instead of hiring someone, what if I designed them? Rowan set down his pen, giving her his full attention. You're serious? Why not? I've been managing the estate finances, implementing agricultural improvements, negotiating with suppliers. Why not add architecture to the list? Because it's unconventional. Duchesses don't design buildings. This duchess does. He smiled, that real smile that still made her heart skip. Then design them. Hell, design whatever you want. Tear down the manor and rebuild it if it makes you happy. I trust you. That's a dangerous amount of trust. You've earned it. She designed the cottages that summer. Not perfect. Her first attempts were structurally questionable and had to be revised with input from actual engineers. But by the third iteration, they had something functional and beautiful. Small homes with good light, efficient layouts, space for gardens. The first one was completed in autumn. John Merrick and his family moved in, and Alara walked through with them, anxiously watching for their reactions. Your Grace, John's wife Mary said, tears in her eyes. It's beautiful. The kitchen, the windows, everything. I never dreamed we'd have something like this. You helped build the estate's prosperity, Alara said. You deserve to share in it. Standing outside the finished cottage, watching smoke curl from the chimney, Alara felt something settle in her chest. This was what she'd been searching for all along. Not acceptance from aristocrats who'd never fully embrace her, but the satisfaction of building something real, something that mattered. Rowan found her there as the sun was setting, wrapped his arms around her from behind. Admiring your work? Wondering if I should quit while I'm ahead. Not a chance. We're building 4 more, remember? We're insane. We're ambitious. There's a difference. They stood there watching the cottage, the estate, the life they'd built from the wreckage of a forced marriage and mutual resentment. Do you ever think about that first night? Alara asked. When I walked in on you with Victoria and wanted to burn everything down? All the time. I was such an ass. You were. But I was also too proud to admit I was hurt. We were both disasters. Past tense? Mostly past tense. We're functional disasters now. Rowan laughed, turned her to face him. I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. It's not. It's just, I was going through old family papers, and I found my parents' marriage contract. It was almost identical to ours, strategic, financial, all obligation and no feeling. And I realized that my father probably stood where I'm standing 30 years ago, looking at a wife he'd married for money, wondering if they'd ever be more than that. Did they? I don't know. They were civil to each other, raised me competently. But I never saw them look at each other the way you and I do. Never saw them laugh together or argue honestly or build something as partners. They had a functional arrangement that produced an air and maintained appearances. That was all. That's sad. It is. But it also makes me grateful. Because we could have ended up the same way. Going through motions for 40 years, never actually connecting. Instead, we fought our way to something real. You make it sound noble. Mostly we just stumbled around making mistakes until we accidentally figured it out. That's what real looks like. Messy and imperfect and earned, not given. 2 years after their wedding, the estate held another harvest celebration. This one was bigger, more confident. Tenants brought their families. Local gentry attended without the edge of skepticism that had marked their earlier interactions. Even Lord Ashcroft came, bringing news that several other estates were adopting Ashford's management innovations. You've started something, he told Alara. A shift in how we think about estate operations. More partnership, less feudalism. It's causing quite a stir in certain circles. Good stir or bad stir? Depends on who you ask. The old guard thinks it's revolutionary and dangerous. The younger generation thinks it's about time. Either way, you're being noticed. I'm not trying to start a revolution. The best ones never are. That evening, after the guests had departed and the staff had cleaned up, Alara and Rowan walked through the grounds together. It had become a ritual, ending major events by touring the estate, reconnecting with the physical space they'd worked so hard to improve. Do you remember what you told me that first night? Rowan asked. About burning the manor down if I ever brought Victoria here again. I was angry. You were magnificent. I'd never seen anyone stand up to me like that, terrified me, and impressed me in equal measure. If I'd known how things would turn out, I might have been less dramatic. Don't change anything. The drama was necessary. We needed the fire to burn away all the pretense. They stopped at the edge of the garden, looking back at the manor. Lights glowed in windows, smoke curled from chimneys, the whole scene looking almost impossibly peaceful. I built a life here, Alara said quietly. I came here expecting nothing, and somehow I built a life. A real one. We built a life. Together. Together, she agreed. Years later, when people asked about the Duke and Duchess of Greymont, about how they'd transformed a failing estate into a model of progressive management, about their unlikely love story, about whether the rumors of their rocky beginning were true, the answers were always complicated. Yes, they'd started as strangers. Yes, there'd been another woman. Yes, the early months had been brutal. But they'd fought through it, not by pretending the problems didn't exist, but by addressing them head-on with messy honesty. They raised children who grew up seeing their parents argue and apologize, fail and try again, build something together through sheer stubbornness and eventual love. They continued innovating estate management, became influential voices in agricultural reform, proved that aristocratic traditions and practical progress weren't mutually exclusive. But more than any of that, they proved something simpler, that marriages aren't built on contracts or initial chemistry or perfect compatibility. They're built on the daily choice to keep trying, keep trusting, keep showing up for each other even when it's hard. On their 10th anniversary, they hosted a dinner. Not the massive social affair they could have organized, just close friends and family. Lady Hertford, now in her 70s and still sharply opinionated. John Merrick and his wife Mary, whose children were attending the school Alara had founded. Mr. and Mrs. Fairweather, who'd watched them grow from hostile strangers into genuine partners. A toast, Lady Hertford announced, raising her glass, to the Duke and Duchess, who proved me right about everything. You weren't right about everything, Alara protested. I was right about the important things. I told you to make him respect you, to build something undeniable. You did both. I'm taking credit. Of course you are. After dinner, Alara found Rowan on the terrace, looking out at grounds they'd reshaped together. Thinking deep thoughts? She asked. Thinking about contracts, about how ours specified everything except what actually mattered. What actually mattered? Whether we'd choose each other, not once in a ceremony, but every day, in small ways and large ones, through grief and triumph and boring Tuesday afternoons. And did we? He turned to face her, and his expression held everything they'd built. The mistakes and repairs, the fights and reconciliations, the slow transformation from obligation to genuine love. We did. We do. We will. That's very certain. I'm certain about you, about us. Took me a while, but I got there eventually. Alara leaned into him, comfortable and secure in a way that 22-year-old her could never have imagined. We got there, together, like everything else. Like everything else, he agreed. Inside, their guests were laughing about something. Outside, their estate stretched into twilight, testimony to everything they'd accomplished. And between them, in the quiet moment before they rejoined the celebration, was the simple truth that had sustained them through everything. They'd started as a transaction and become a choice. Not a single choice made once, but thousands of small choices made daily. To trust when it was hard, to be honest when it hurt, to build instead of retreat, to love deliberately, imperfectly, but genuinely. That was the real victory, not the thriving estate or the social acceptance or the financial success. Just two people who'd refused to settle for the cold marriage they'd been given and insisted on earning something better. Together.